Right? But he was like, welcome to the Wednesday, March 5th, 2025 Garrison Board of Education regular workshop meeting. My mic's not working? Come real close. You're gonna get a louder welcome. All right. Welcome to the Wednesday, March 5th, 2025 Garrison Board of Education regular workshop meeting. Can we call the roll, please?
Jocelyn Apatello, Eric Arnold.
Here.
Jennifer Harrison Wilson,
Excused?
Dan Jeffnow.
Here.
Peter Lesser.
Here.
Ken Schott.
Here.
Sarah Torme.
Here. Education, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Next up, I have accept agenda changes. Do I have any recommended changes this evening?
I also move the SRO discussion to after the first public comment.
I just want to keep it so people can hear the discussion items.
Anyone want to make my motion?
Right, really. Yeah, I like it where it is.
That's fine. I wanted to try to get that first.
Thank you. All right. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free District School hereby accept the agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Thank you. All right, that does bring us to our first board communications and presentations. First, we have an SRO follow-up task force discussion. So I'm going to introduce this. We're going to begin our discussion with a report from Dan, the chair of the SRO task force. And then Greg will also offer an overview of the survey results. After we hear the reports, we're going to have a board discussion. The goal of tonight's SRO SPO discussion is to reach a consensus on including the SRO SPO in the 2025-2026 budget process or not. This is currently listed as under consideration in the budget presentation that we will see later this evening, which along with the school lunch, which the Budget Advisory Committee has been working on. So before I turn it over to Dan, I would ask the board members hold their questions for Dan and Greg until the end of their presentation, and then we'll open it up to the board. Okay. Dan, you're up.
Thank you, Sarah. As you know, the task force was charged by the board with exploring the potential inclusion of an SRO or SPO in the 2025-26 school year budget, including evaluating the benefits and implications of having an SRO or SPO in our schools. Overall, we did not reach a consensus or take a poll on where folks stand, but we have gathered lots of useful feedback and other information that can better inform the board's decision. The task force consisted of 20 members of the Garrison community, including 3 board members, 8 teachers or administrators, and 9 parents, community members unaffiliated with the board. And we had 2 meetings of the full task force here in the Learning Commons, the first on January 27th and the second on February 27th. At the second meeting, we heard from Sheriff McConville, Deputy Tolby, who is the SRO of Haldane, and Sergeant Rossi, who is the supervisor of the Youth Bureau for the Putnam County Sheriff's Office. We also heard from Dr. Matthew Landau, who's the superintendent of Beacon Public Schools, which does not employ any SROs or SPOs. 6 members of the task force also visited the Gannett Hills School District on February 10th, where we met with their superintendent and met with their SRO. We reviewed a number of materials that we made available to the full board, including all of the emails and communications we received from community members, sample SRO, SPO agreements between Brewster, a sample agreement between Brewster and the Putnam County Sheriff's Office, a summary of security improvements the district has made since 2021 and mental health resources that are available to students and staff. We reviewed the GTA's letter of support of an SRO or SPO, a description of incidents in which SROs and SPOs have provided assistance to schools in Putnam County, research about SROs and SPOs, as well as the results of a survey of GTA members, which showed approximately 90% support for an SRO SPO among the GTA membership. We also, as Dr. Stoll will talk about, conducted the community survey, which just closed on Tuesday. But overall, that showed about 53% of the community either strongly or somewhat in favor of an SRO SPO in the budget, about 40% against, and about 7% neutral. A couple key issues that we talked about were the cost. So the cost differences between an SPO and an SRO. The SPO, which is a retired officer, is about $42,000 a year, which we may require two of, compared to an SRO, which would be about up to $150,000 a year. And then just quickly, some of the key other areas that were sort of, I'd say, a main source of disagreement, or that we discussed at length, were why this issue has come up now and what the potential security concerns are that an SRO SPO would address. Most notably, the GTA noted that the issue of hiring an SRO or SPO has come up repeatedly over the years. And again, after the recent Mayopac shooting incident that led to school lockouts in neighboring districts or cancellations. We also heard from the teachers that one of the primary concerns is about the threat of school shootings, as well as emergency response times within the county from the Putnam County Sheriff's Office. We discussed at length whether alternatives would be better to address the perceived security needs, including hardening building security, investing more in mental health and SEL, or providing training to teachers. And we also discussed at length whether armed security is necessary to meet those needs, and whether the presence of an armed individual in the building improves or is a disadvantage to the security, perceptions of security within the building. Finally, we talked about the impact on the culture and the disciplinary atmosphere within the building, and whether or not having an SRO or SPO in the building would lead to an overly punitive environment, and whether we could clearly delineate the line between normal student discipline issues and law enforcement while protecting student privacy, particularly in light of students who might be neurodiverse or have special needs. Finally, we talked about what mitigations we could put in place in order to address some of those concerns, including a strong memorandum of understanding between the district and the sheriff's office, paying close attention to the onboarding process of an SRO, SPO, and making sure that that person is aware of the cultural fit, the culture in the building, and whether or not an armed officer could minimize or conceal their weapon. So as I said, we made the findings from the task force available to the full board, which has had a chance to review. But overall, I want to thank the task force members who participated. It was definitely a significant time commitment. And overall, I think we had two very constructive conversations that I think will help us, moving forward with the decision. Greg, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. First of all, I want to not only thank the task force, but all of our community members that responded to the survey. We really appreciate the engagement. And I'm just going to give a high level kind of, not every single answer that people put in, but a high level to the board and the community. We had about 214 respondents to the survey. 53.7% of the respondents have children in the Garrison school. 13.5% of the respondents have children in one of our 3 partner high schools. 1.9% of respondents had a child in private or parochial school, and about 41% of our respondents did not have school-aged children. So that's who answered the survey. And just an overall overview of the support for an SRO or an SPO in the school budget out of the 214 responses. We had 50.4% of all respondents say they were very likely or somewhat likely to support it. 7.5% of respondents were neutral in their support. 42% of respondents were very unlikely or somewhat unlikely to support. And breaking that down a little bit more by subgroup, Of the respondents with school-age children, 62% were very likely or somewhat likely to support, 10% were neutral, and 28% were very unlikely or somewhat unlikely to support. And out of the respondents without children, about 59% of those respondents were very unlikely or somewhat unlikely to support. And that is kind of an overview of the survey.
All right, so now I'm gonna open it up. If you have questions for either Dan or Greg, or if we want to jump in and start sharing our thoughts on sort of what our thinking is at this. In January, we now have a task force report back. And come to an idea of where the board stands on this issue. The goal of this, again, is to help our administrative team as they plan the budget. This is something we wish to include. We are not taking a vote on this at this point, nor would it be a resolution item. It would be included in the budget and then voted on when the individual was hired if we choose to go down that path. Anyone want to kick it off?
Happy to kick it off.
Go for it, Dan. You spent the most time with this.
Yes, I did. So, I'm certainly in support of adding an SRO or an SPO to the budget. I think probably an SPO makes the most sense for our district at this time. And I think it's important to contextualize, what we are talking about doing here within the broader context of building security. We talked a lot on the task force about whether or not an SRO, SPO is sufficient to keep the school safe. And I think everybody agrees, or even if it detracts from school safety, I think everybody agrees that an SRO is not sufficient. I think an SRO is something, or an SPO is something that we think about within the context of everything else that we are doing for school security. And in my view, that should be an all of the above approach. And the school, first in my mind about security is mental health, clinical services for students, social emotional learning, and creating a culture within the school that allows for students and staff to get to know teachers, to identify potential risk issues or threats, and make sure that the overall culture of the building is supportive of that. I think that it's clear that we are already a model when it comes to mental health and social emotional learning in this building. There's of course always more we can do, but I think that we have already made those investments. We are continuing to make those investments in mental health and social emotional learning. We have a full-time psychologist on staff. We have a full-time school counselor on staff. We obviously have a very low student to teacher ratio. And then we've also made significant investments in the building, hardening of the building perimeter. As part of the 2021 capital improvement project, we obviously, as most of you know, did a new entrance portico that is more secure. We have automated door locks on the external doors. All of these things that I think we're already doing. So in my mind, it's not, is this something we are doing instead of all of this other stuff? It's, do we want an insurance plan on top of these things that we are already doing? And I think the answer to that is yes. I am very sensitive to the concerns people have about the impact on discipline and maintaining the culture in this building. That's, I think, something that makes Garrison very special, but I'm very confident in our staff and in our administration that we will be able to bring somebody into the building, the right person into the building, and ensure that they are that they understand the culture of this place and that they will be under strong supervision to make sure that we clearly delineate the role of this individual versus what is normal, ordinary student discipline, which needs to be the prerogative of the teachers and the staff. And ultimately, we talked a lot about the research, about whether SROs or SPOs are effective. I'm of the view that the research is inconclusive. Many of the studies that say that they're not effective acknowledge that you can't really effectively study whether or not an SRO or SPO is effective at averting school shootings or other, crisis-related incidents. So you can't necessarily measure that. And ultimately, to me, what's most important is that the teachers that are in this building, many of whom, if we are lucky, will spend 20 or 30 years in this building, almost unanimously think this is an important thing to do. And so to me, that is a really critical piece of this. I think we have to do this very carefully and very mindfully, which I think the task force conversation showed that we can do as a community. But I'm confident that we can do that, and that this is only the beginning of the process. It's not a final decision, it's just a decision to move forward, to find somebody that we think is a good fit, and to bring that person in, make sure they're a good fit, have the opportunity, the authority to get rid of that person if they're not a good fit, and then revisit this decision next year. So overall, I'm confident that we can mitigate whatever cultural or disciplinary concerns there might be. And at the end of the day, I think, making sure we have every element in place for the safety and security of the building is the most important thing.
Can I ask a couple of questions? Did the task force or has anybody talked about where we might have some gaps in terms of mental health, in terms of current funding, increasing that, where we need to go on that? So that's just question one. I don't know if it came up, so.
Yeah, it definitely did come up. We talked a lot about it. And actually, we're going to do if we can talk about the May present.
We're hoping to add
Yeah.
a mental health presentation during Mental Health Awareness Month. And again, I will add that at any point, if any board member ever wants a presentation, please reach out and let me know, and I will pass it along.
But I think in response to the direct question, we don't know the unmet needs because we haven't directly asked the staff necessarily that I know of because I've asked. And we haven't received an answer on what the unmet needs might be.
So we did talk about that, and my understanding, and obviously I've only been on the board for 2 years, but
Longer than me.
so I have never been made aware of a need in the mental health space that the board has not provided, right? So we rely on our administration to bring these topics to our attention. Since I've been on the board, we have never cut any programs. We haven't, I know there was a discussion before I joined the board where that was potentially, under consideration, but that has not been an issue here. I asked Dr. Stoll, early on when I became VP, whether there were any, resources that the administration was lacking. Were there anything that we needed to be funding that we weren't funding? And not just Dr. Stoll, but I think that's been, I think Dr. Albano, also said we were meeting all those needs. And, if you look at the ratio that we have of trained clinicians, so that's our school psychologist and our school counselor, compared to the number of students we have, it's 2 for 220 students, which is, Dr. Stoll can say, but I think that's probably the best ratio in the region, if not more than that. We do a ton in SEL programming, we do a ton in SEL training. And I'm not saying we're perfect, right? I mean, I think we should be doing more. I think that should be a focus, of everything we do in this building. But it's not, to me, it doesn't mean you don't do those other things. We should be asking those questions. We should be doing everything we can, whether it's maybe we should look at Sandy Hook Promise or those other things. But that to me doesn't say, well, we can't do the SRO, SPO because we should also do these other things. It's that we should do all these things because they're important.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Jocelyn has articulated the question better than I have, which is just, I think we need to be really asking what those unmet needs might be now, as opposed to later.
Yeah.
So I think we should ask that question, because if for every, dollar that we put, toward, security, that's a dollar we're not putting toward mental health, right? So I would like to know what those unmet needs are, and if and how we can address them. Second question I had is, it sounds like it was a lean toward an SPO, and I was wondering if you could explain the rationale for it. And the reason I ask is just because some of the research I've done indicates a couple of concerns about an SPO. Yes, they're cheaper, but from everything I've found, they don't receive as much training as an SRO. And I also don't know, Greg, this is probably a more direct question for you. What I don't know is what their legal obligations are in a crisis. An SRO who is a member of the sheriff's department, right, has more training, probably faster response, is trained to do certain things that an SPO isn't necessarily. So I was just curious if you could give me a little bit of context in terms of how an SPO is kind of where the task force leans and how we account for some of those concerns that even people who are very pro armed security say, you might not want to do an SPO. So.
Yeah. So I don't want to say that the task force lean one way or the other. I think that it's something we should talk about. The SROs are obviously much more expensive, so they'd be a bigger resource allocation. And even some of the folks like in Mechanico, either the SRO there or the superintendent said, for such a small district, you may not need an SRO. I don't know, maybe it wasn't him, but it's somebody, to that effect. I think an SPO is a good way for us to test the water on sort of this concept and see if it works. Ultimately, the sheriff's office said that they get the same sort of annual training as an SRO, but they're also, as you said, a retired officer. So they're not necessarily sort of in the mix. And one thing we asked was, they talked about conferences that the SROs go to, and I said, well, do the SPOs get to go to those conferences? And the answer to that was no, because they're not active employees of the sheriff's office. I think there would certainly be advantages to having an SRO, in my view, when it comes to training. There are other advantages of having an SRO. The Deputy Tolby, who's at Haldane, talked a lot about the educational, push-in that he does there. That he goes in and teaches, civics and various other things. The SPOs likely aren't going to be able to do that level of instruction. They do the sort of the DARE replacement program, at least DARE, but I was a kid, I can't remember what it's called now. But they do that kind of thing, and it's unlikely that they could do that. So they're trade-offs. I mean, it's
There's
less.
a couple other things that are different that I think is meaningful that was
Yeah.
brought up. Is that an SRO drives a patrol car and will park their car in our parking lot or somewhere nearby, and the SPO drives their own personal vehicle, which has come up as like a deterrent is having a patrol car in the parking lot. There was one other one.
The uniform is different.
The uniform,
Right.
yeah, okay, well that, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
that-
one is dark blue, one's light blue, and there's probably less swag on the SPOs compared to that.
Yeah. I mean, there were differences of opinion on the task force about that, some people found, like when we went to Mechanico, some people found the, full dress of the SRO, they're in full uniform, bulletproof vest, all that kind of stuff to be jarring, but you also have the benefit of having the patrol car outside, which potentially is deterrence, so the SPO would be more, in street clothes, not exactly, but it's more like that some people thought was an advantage.
Can I ask a question? Because you just mentioned that that Condico said that the size, with given your size of the school, maybe you should just go with an SPL. How does size?
Yeah, actually, I think I think they actually said go with an SRO, but other people have said that.
Sure.
Yeah,
The sheriff said go with an SPO.
yes, they do with the sheriff.
But I don't know what size.
Yeah. Yeah.
Didn't know if you got anything about it.
Eric, where do you still?
I have one other thought, but it's unrelated to the current track, so if you please go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think it was really interesting to serve on the task force. I think it was, I learned a lot about what the community cares about, and I think it's really a tough choice. Not that it's a choice right now, but I think it's a tough thing to think about. Personally, I don't really think, I think there's little to no evidence that an SPO or an SRO makes the school safer. But I think there's little to no evidence that it makes us less safe either, you know. And I think that to me makes it really hard. I mean, our teachers have come to us with a really clear ask. The community is split on the issue, I think. And, you know, I've been trying to reflect on what our role is as a board. And I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, being smart with the public's money. I think everything is a trade-off. And, you know, my mind is open to the idea of an SPO or an SRO. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it helps us. But teachers have to ask for it, and they live in the school essentially. So I think that's very important. But I think, you know, we can't, I think we have to think about that if we move forward with this, we're doing something, we're spending the public's money on something that really isn't going to be effective in doing what we hope it could do. The research just doesn't bear that out. You know, and I think if we move forward with this in some way, I think we should just try to do it in the most cost-effective way possible. Even if that's like just one SPO, they're here part-time, maybe they're on an unpredictable schedule, you know, and maybe that provides some better feeling of safety. And also, I think if we do invest here, kind of to what Eric said, I think we need to be really thinking about investing in things that actually do make us safer, which is more training when it comes to gun safety and SEL and mental health services. And again, I believe the administration, I believe Dan, right? When they say like, we're at the very top end of that, but we haven't really asked what's on Krista's wish list, what's on David's wish list, what else should we be doing? You know, and I think the research points to that as being much more effective in preventing what is the worst case scenario than having an armed officer in the building. So I'm pretty skeptical, you know, very skeptical that something like this would make us safer. I don't think it's a good use of our money. But if we do move forward with it, I think we have to think about investing also in something that actually might help us, which is more SEL, mental health, etc. So I think it's a really tough choice. I think the teachers' feelings are incredibly important, but I keep coming back to what the role of the board is, and I think it's to make decisions about the public's money that are prudent. I just don't think it is.
On that point, and actually, Pete, you sent us into the direction where my next question was, so thank you for that, is the split in the survey I found, and this isn't really a question, it's really more of a concern. The split in the survey indicated to me a concern about passing the budget in spring. You know, there's, granted, it's apples and oranges, but we know in Chappaqua last year, their budget got voted down from an SRO. Granted, they already had one. It was an issue about adding a second one. And, you know, I don't know, last you checked, you know, Chappaqua is not really hurting for funding in their school budget, but people were upset enough that they turned out and voted it down. And so the split in those percentages and knowing the razor thin margins we have sometimes in passing the budget, my concern is that if we include it, we lose budget vote. And so that's part one. I think, you know, part two is this is the question, is if we include it in the budget, does that mean we actually have to hire right away? You know, can it be the sort of thing where it's budgeted for, but then we explore, all right, what are we gonna do, how are we gonna do it, when are we gonna do it? So that's more, so first is, that's my worry. Second is the question, do we have to go full bore right away if it's in the budget?
The basic answer to that is we would plan for it, it would be in the budget, but the budget would start July 1st anyway, and then you know, there's plenty of things that take us a little while that we budget for. So yes, we can take our time and plan and do this thoughtfully. But I do think if this does make it into the budget, we would be cognizant of the expectation that putting it in comes with, which I would think would be like when people return to school. So that, in my mind, that's just my logical sense. And you look like you.
No, I mean, I don't think this is I think we're talking about SR and not whether passing the budget or not. And I don't think that's actually an appropriate way to look at this, but, I mean, I came to this whole idea not immediately supportive of it. I've had kids in this school for 12 years. It just didn't seem like something. In the data, you know, Dan and Peter, you're right. The data is not conclusive. It's not a guide and you can say, yes, this is what I'm doing because it shows this or that. It doesn't. Unfortunately, it just doesn't. But I do take the safety of our kids very seriously, and I take the feelings of the community very seriously. And the data that I think is most important is the data, the teacher support for this, and the data of the parents support for this. 60% of the parents support doing this. Those are the people that are in the school walls every day, that are most familiar with the school. And, you know, I think that's kind of the data that's going to guide my thoughts on that and my support for doing something on this. You know, I really appreciate the work of the task force, appreciate the time and energy put into this. But I also agree this is just a piece of the security puzzle, but it's not a zero-sum game. You guys, there was some talk like, well, if we do this, we won't fund that. That's not true. And I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe the support will ever do that. So I just think it's another piece of the puzzle, like Dan said. And, you know, implementation is going to be extremely important. Nobody wants a disciplinarian. Nobody wants them involved in that. This is about safety. That will be in the details of that. But overall, you know, I think we need a strongly worded agreement. That's why we have great lawyers. We have a great lawyer heading the task force. So I think there are a lot of opportunities here. I don't think it's, you know, it's not, nobody in the world wants their kid going to school and a police officer. We didn't grow up with that. I'm assuming very few, if any of us grew up with that. It doesn't seem right, but that is the world we live in now. I think there are opportunities for teaching moments here. I think if we find the right person, which we should endeavor to do, it can be a positive. So, you know, overall, I'm really confident we could, if we do this, we will integrate this person into the culture of Garrison. We've seen that happen in Haldane. Officer Toll's very integrated into the culture there, and I believe, given our community, we won't have a hard time doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in full confidence in terms of the implementation. I think, you know, this group and Greg and his team will write a great, you know, MOU that does reflect the community. I'm not worried about that. I think the line between discipline and not, I'm not worried about finding that line, actually. I think we can do that quite easily. And so, yeah, to me, it's not that. I mean, it's a really hard one for me. I really do believe that, you know, the teachers asking for this is really the only reason that we've been supportive of it in any way, you know, because I don't think there's really any evidence that it helps. But if that's the case, then that's how we're going to move forward. I think we should try to spend less, you know, on this, because it's not, in my mind, going to really help us in terms of what it's really hoping to do. And I'm not saying it's a zero-sum game. If we spend over here, we have to do this, but I think we should think of it holistically. And to me, it's a both and kind of approach. I don't think we fully explored what the and is, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I think the other challenge for me is moving forward without the MOU, without really understanding what the person's job is and what it isn't. And I think the elephant in the room, frankly, is, you know, certainly from a lot of the comments or questions I received from parents and other members of the public is, you know, is somebody patrolling the hallways with a loaded firearm? And that's really at the crux of it, right? So that's where I'm sort of concerned in terms of putting in the budget without an MOU. Like, so that's where the rubber meets the road, really, right? I think, you know, as I've said before in past meetings, I think it can be, having an SPO or an SRO can be part of the plan, but that's the part of it that I think makes a lot of people nervous, myself included. Not that the person, doesn't have access to one, that's fine, that's part of the, security officer's job. Walking around the hallways with one, that, for a lot of people, that's a problem. And so putting it in the budget without an MOU, or without that kind of understanding is, I think, worrying to a lot of people I've spoken to. So many of them have said that they are in favor of having, the security personnel here, but that's where they draw the line. And not that the person can't be armed, it's that they don't want them necessarily wandering hallways armed. And I get that. I understand that. It's worrying and it invites risk. So that's my concern in terms of putting it in the budget now without necessarily a clear understanding of what the person's job is and what the person's job isn't.
I don't know that we need to do, I think we have to have the budgetary authority to engage in the discussions on an MOU. And then if, obviously if we don't like where the negotiations go, then, we don't have to proceed. The budgetary decision to me, or I think accurately, is that does the board have authority to go out and begin negotiations over this position? So that's gonna, just from a procedural standpoint, that's gonna kick off the MOU discussions, and I don't think we could do that in good faith if we hadn't authorized the expenditure.
I think that it's not clear if we can go in and negotiate that strongly. I think being on a task force and being at both meetings and then being at the presentation where the sheriff and the sergeant and the deputy were present, it's their employee, right? And they made that clear. The Brewster MOU that was shared with us and the task force is weak, in my opinion. It's for an SPO, so I don't know how it would look differently for an SR. And the task force members, after our last meeting last week, and then a couple board members, I'm sure, I know I did, wrote some questions directly to the Putnam County Sheriff to ask that they be responded to, and we just don't have the answers yet. There was over a dozen questions that we don't have the answers to yet. And I think that makes it hard to move forward when we don't know, for example, beyond weapons and when they can be concealed and when it can't, and MOU negotiations and discipline is one of the more alarming things that I think came out of the task force meeting was, the deputy sergeant and sheriff were very friendly and they gave a great kind of overview of what happens in a lot of schools. And the way that they have sold the program to us is that they're kind of friends of the district when they come in. They're friends, they high five, they shake hands, and people like them, which is a good thing, right? That was I feel like that came very clearly across from them. They care about not scaring our students, not scaring our staff, and being like a part of the community. But when asked directly about what kind of security and safety, measures they do for us, the first and lengthy response was about data collection and surveillance. And I'm not very interested in turning over a lot of data through their observation or through our disciplinary records or through whatever might happen in school to the state. It's very clear that they have a very good and robust surveillance system that is across the county. But entering into an MOU with the department or the office, the sheriff's office, is going to leave a lot of our data for our students vulnerable, and I felt very uncomfortable. I wasn't expecting that response. I thought they were going to talk about how they patrol randomly and, do things that are like a little more like border security of the building perimeter. But they went right into surveillance and data. And there's follow-up questions regarding this, and we just don't know the answers yet. So I feel a little worried and concerned about that.
I wanted to actually, I think that's a fair point, and I think we do have some outstanding questions, and we're still awaiting those answers, correct? I want to go back though to something you spoke to a minute ago regarding the teacher support. and what our role as a board is. Because I think that's a really interesting question there. I mean, yes, we're allocating funds, right? So I've been on, this is my 6th year on the board, and Jocelyn joined not long after me. I do recall the last time we had this discussion in 2019, 2020, and I was strongly opposed to putting a gun in the school. I don't like guns, and I think at the time we were looking at the hope that something else would change outside of like beyond our borders, basically. We did a resolution in NISBA on gun storage. We hoped our representatives and other politicians would take action. I don't think a lot has changed, and I think that is part of what has shifted my perspective. I also do take the teachers' request very seriously, and part of this board's role is to work with the unions. We do collective bargaining, we negotiate with them. They have been incredibly strong partners to us. We haven't always agreed with our decisions, that's been very clear. But they've always worked with us to find solutions. They've taken a pay freeze for us when we were struggling with our budget, so that we could lower the tax levy increase. They have increased the amount they contribute to health insurance. I think they're really willing to meet us halfway in a lot of things. And in my time here, I have not seen such a direct, strong ask. And so that's what gives me pause, is that this isn't 1 or 2 union members, it is the majority of them asking for something. And they're the ones here every day. I think you mentioned this, Peter, too, that, I want them to feel safe so they can focus on teaching and learning. We ask a lot of our teachers in terms of teaching and learning. We have gone through multiple different iterations of training for teachers college to science of reading. They come with us lockstep every way, changing the way their pedagogy, changing how they deliver instruction, what the curriculum is. And that's where I think we all want their focus to be. And I do understand that it does sometimes feel like you hear about school shootings a lot, whether it's realistically likely to happen here. I can't imagine the feeling of knowing it's out there and you're in this building. So that's, for me, yes, the data goes different ways, you can look at it, but I want to honor their feelings on this and their request. Even though I do agree that putting a gun in the school does give me pause, and I would like to look at questions of, I think it needs to be an armed officer. I think that is part of the request. And I think if we're going to honor it, we should honor it fully to ensure that it meets the need. And then I would ask, if we pilot this for a year, I'd like to know, do they feel safer? Have we changed anything in that regard? How is it, do they like what it's done? Whether it's an SPO or SRO, I'm really, I would leave that up to the administration. I would side with Peter that I would prefer an SPO, the cheaper one, for budgetary reasons, and see how it goes. Whether they can carry concealed, things like that, those are great questions. But I think we can get those questions answered as we progress, and still have it in this budget as something to consider. We have many more budget meetings to continue talking about it, but what I would like to see is giving our administration time to plan for this, to understand where that money is coming from. It does also happen to be a budget year, which we're going to see soon, where we have the fund balance to draw on to run a pilot program like this. I know I read in some of the letters too, have we looked at our safety plan? And it's not lost on me that this request comes from the people who create our district safety and emergency response plan. The team is the teachers and our mental health response people. They work on the plan that gets presented to the board every summer that we approve. It's up for public hearing every summer. You can review it, come in and comment on it. So the fact that the people who are running the drills, who are doing this work, are making this request really resonates with me as well, because I'm not here doing that. Yeah, so that's sort of, in terms of what is our role, I think our role is to, yes, we do stand up to the union when we part ways, but I think our role here is to also listen and work collaboratively so that we have teachers who feel safe in the school. I mean, really important, and every time I keep hearing, oh, the data, I'm like, I have a really hard time with the idea of bringing data to a discussion about how someone feels, essentially what is their home, where they spend their days. I also do have a child who is in high school now, and all of our high school partners have SROs, SPOs, so I think kids will eventually, if they stay in the public school system, move on to districts that have that presence. And for those who feel it's alarming, it's going to be there when they get to that point. I think that's just a reality of the world we live in, and it's not great. I wish it wasn't that way. So that's my thought.
I think you said it very well. I think you said it. And you've been here the longest working with the teachers and faculty administration. I just want to bring up one more data point because it's hard, but the teachers have overwhelmingly asked for it, which is we have to listen to. But also a majority of teachers indicated that they would consider an unarmed guard. The board went that way. That's a data point.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm saying by bringing that up is I still think the teachers maybe aren't, I don't know, are they all clear on it? Because if the majority are willing to accept unarmed security, which also is my last unanswered kind of piece of information is, what does a security officer cost us as a district from some private facility? Can you have in the budget, instead of a line that says SRO or SPO, can it just say security officer? So we can all move forward and vote, right? I have no idea.
We can't,
But the point is like, yeah, so getting a human in here, okay, we haven't even talked about response time, there's so many things to talk about. Overwhelming, but, there's that idea that like, they're willing to consider that, and so, what does that mean?
I think on that point, and we have a lot of representatives from the GTA here tonight, who I'm sure will, if they want to speak during public comments, can address it. But certainly during the task force, that came up, that was a strongly disfavored outcome.
But it was 67% in favor.
Right, but this came up at the last task force meeting where I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but that they would, of course, if that's what the board went with, that they would, they were willing to support that.
Well, that was what one or two people said at the task force meeting, not the whole entire survey of people. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't want to speak for the GTA, but I think I think the GTA has been very clear that they strongly, they've made very clear what the ask is, and I think as Sarah said, the ask is for an armed security in the building.
I also want to make it clear that while we've been referencing the GTA, my understanding was the request was not just from the GTA, but also from the SRP. It was a joint request from both.
I do just quickly want to go back to the idea of the efficacy of security in the building, armed security. And, if you look at, we had a summary prepared by PNW BOCES of incidents where SROs or SPOs have responded to security incidents at Putnam County schools. And that's not just, there's a shooting, right? The shooting is obviously worst case scenario.
Well, none of them were.
Right. So obviously that's worst case scenario, but there are incidents like there is a strange individual wandering school grounds during the school day. And I think we have to think about, what is our expectation of the people, the staff, the teachers and the staff in this building? Is it their responsibility to go and address that situation? Is it our grounds, is it our facilities crew's responsibility to go do that? I don't necessarily think that's a reasonable expectation to say that, our facility staff, our teachers our superintendent should be responsible for, dealing with those types of incidents. There's also, there are a ton of documented incidences where students go to an SRO or an SPO and they say, hey, I saw this, another student, made a threat, or where somebody tells them about a weapon in the building. And I think those are also important considerations. There are certainly incidents where SROs, SPOs have not been effective. The data certainly raises questions about their efficacy in preventing a school shooting. But as I said before, it doesn't talk about the deterrence effect because you just can't really measure that. And it also doesn't really talk about, there are also clearly incidents where they have been effective. I mean, there are, worst case scenario, there are shooting incidents where SROs or SPOs have responded. There are incidents where they have addressed other non-shooting, incidents. There are incidents, or there are documented incidences where students have gone to the SRO or SPO to alert them to something that they thought might be an issue. So again, I don't think any of us know what of these things would be effective, right? I mean, if you're talking about a security incident in this building, hopefully, some sort of early detection threat is caught by our mental health, our school psychologist or our counselor. Hopefully, if somebody comes to the building, they're prevented from getting in by the perimeter security, whatever it might be, but we just don't know. And that ultimately, it is a fact that they have at times been effective at preventing worse outcomes, and it's also a fact that at times they've been ineffective. So I think, to me, well, potentially.
Yeah, harmful.
But I think there's a certain level of, again, to me, it goes back to it's all of the above. And there are people that are in this building that feel very strongly about it, and to me that is enough to push it over the edge for me, because I think you can't necessarily say that, you can't say definitively one way or the other which of these various things is going to be the one that, God forbid something happens, would be the most effective.
Quick budgetary question then. So if you include it, is it at the SPO level or is it at the SRO level? Because there's obviously a huge variance in cost there.
I think that's a question for all of us.
I did the math
To get,
based on Joe's upcoming budget presentation.
to gauge, whether we want, which one we want included, in terms of procedural, also remind everyone, well, we're looking at building the budget now. Again, we don't vote on the budget until April 5th, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sometime in April. So we do have, because I really want to make sure we get these questions answered, and I think there's a lot of things that are still up in the air that we don't totally understand around the topic. And we can't just sort of walk away from that. So what I'm proposing, we can continue this discussion now. I do have the sense, I do have Jennifer's not here tonight. She is in favor of adding it, and she left the discretion of the SRO, SPO to the superintendent. But I think we need to also include her and have her voice heard in another budget presentation in order to have this fully on the record and her included in this. But what I'd like to propose is doing another discussion once we have the answers to those questions, specifically the ones from the sheriff's department, any others you see. So, this isn't a closed book. Like, I think we have at least a majority in favor of moving forward with putting it in the budget at this point. And continue with the caveat that we explore these questions, continue to look at, the issues around, is it an armed officer? That doesn't affect cost, but that's something we need to consider. So that is where, I'm happy to stay here all night, but I understand that not everybody wants to. That's my thought. Does that sound like a good place where we're at? Does anyone else have any other thoughts they want to share tonight?
I have so many thoughts, but since you're saying there's another opportunity.
I think we should continue. I think we are, and always, again, if you want, anytime you want to talk about something, I love building agendas, but I think like more discussion. I think discussion is great, things like this. Any item you want to see, or as long as we give the staff enough notice, presentations from staff, I think it's great too, so.
I think the only thing I want to just highlight again is the community survey. If 50% of people would not support a budget that included in SRO, according to a survey that only surveyed 214 people.
That's not true.
It was 50.4%.
It will, could be, a majority do support it, 7% are neutral. It's not, it's 50.7%.
I know, but the point is, no, but then, but the only 50.4 would support as of right now, and
It's
that's.
60% of the parents support.
But
It is important,
Wait,
these
I
are,
just want to, wait,
but
hold on
these
a
are
second.
numbers, like, these are, you're
No, no,
saying
hold
that
on,
the
it's
budget
not,
will fail
it
if
doesn't
you do
just
this,
matter
that's
about
not.
the parents, because the people who come out to vote include everyone in our
I'm
community.
not saying it doesn't matter.
I know you know that very well. What I'm saying is the community survey suggested that the community is not necessarily behind this. So either our job is to get them behind it through a newsletter or through other education, because we don't have the budgetary support yet. Because there's only 50.4 who would somewhat support or strongly support. That's not enough for me.
I think,
But that's also just a survey of 214
Yeah,
people.
my reading of the
Oh,
214
Also, I would hazard a guess, for the survey applicant said we want to spend money on pets. You would get 50 to 55% yes, and always a solid base.
I think a lot of I do think that
It's
people.
not a discussion about
Stand it
SROs, though, it's a
Do
discussion
it about the
about.
lunch program then and see what people say. I don't know, there's so many things in the air and on our budget and under consideration coming up. I just don't feel comfortable with 50%. Yes. 50.4.
So much of this is gonna come down to how it's done. And I mean, the thing that I'm worried about most is we say yes to this, and then we get into a situation where the sheriff says that we can't agree to like half the things that you guys want of how this is gonna be done. We just have to say no to this. Like, that's what he says to us, right? So where do we go from here? You know,
I
what-
think that's a separate conversation once we get to the MOU, sort of, what are we comfortable with at that point? But I'm not comfortable taking the SRO, SPO off the table for next year's budget because we don't know the answers to the MOU. I think we are gonna, but at that time, we don't have to vote on the MOU. We can't put this person in place regardless of whether we budget for it without the MOU in place. And we cannot, at that point, we will vote on hiring them. But we have to have the money first.
Right, I understand, but
Yeah.
it seems like once, it seems like,
It's not, you have the ability to vote no, you don't like the MOU, you don't like anything about it. Majority of the board objects to it, it doesn't happen. It's just not
Yeah.
hired, it doesn't matter if the budget happens.
And then that rolls back in fund balance, which is how we're in this position right now, because we have fund. All right, so I think we have this is going to be an ongoing discussion, which also means I think we will have people continuing to show up at our board meetings, so, yeah, we're gonna put this,
Every
again.
agenda moving forward, every agenda.
Every-
So that people show up.
I know this was more exciting than audit. Anyway, so we will add this again. We have the questions to share. Any other questions we want to see, we will put in. And then that brings us to the budget presentation.
Which I'd like to make a motion if possible to move public comment up to now.
Taking away.
With respect to the community that's come out, I'm not sure everybody in the audience is interested in seeing the budget presentation, which they can watch.
It's so good.
They can watch online, it'll be available several meetings in a row now, there's a lot of opportunities to go through. But I think, with respect to the audience, I'm sure there are a lot of people that. So I make a motion to open public comment now.
All in favor?
I,
Please watch the budget. It's so exciting.
Yes.
All right, can I have the sheet, please? Okay. You want to read your?
Oh, let me read I'm out of order, so I have to read my whole thing. Okay. Public comment is intended for members of the community to speak openly and voice concerns. In accordance with policy 1510 of the Garrison Union Free School District, any person wishing to speak shall comply with all provisions of this policy. Comments about specific school personnel or individual students is a violation of board policy. Concerns regarding students or personnel should be discussed privately with the superintendent or appropriate administrator. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and speakers are asked to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. The board will listen to comments but will not engage in dialogue. Any necessary follow-up will be noted and provided through the appropriate channel. Members of the public wishing to comment during board meetings are asked to place their name and town of residence on the sign-in sheet. Commenters will be invited to the podium to address the board.
I'm going to begin with Laura Green, please.
Hello. My name's Laura Green, and I'm a mother in the Garrison School District. Additionally, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I live and breathe mental health. One of my core beliefs is that every child at birth deserves not only a pediatrician to care for their physical health, but also a mental health professional to ensure their overall wellness. I want to take a moment to define and reframe this issue to dispel some myths. Our teachers express an overwhelming desire, 92%, to increase security at GUFs. We do not have to choose or compromise between mental health services, academic advancements, or the safety of our community. We can and should do all of these things. We can say yes to robust mental health services and yes to STEAM programs that will equip our children for the future. We can also say yes to ensuring the safety of our students by having an SRO in the building. I was privileged to participate in the task force discussions around the potential implementation of an SRO. And while I greatly appreciate the thoughtful discourse that has taken place, there were concerns raised that I'd like to address. One argument that surfaced during our discussions was a concern about students possibly feeling uncomfortable with the presence of a police officer in the school. I totally understand this concern, and I believe that we can use this as an opportunity for psychoeducation and exposure therapy. With the support of our very own counselors, Dr. Rober and Ms. Diego, students can learn to cope with the presence of law enforcement in a supportive, guided way. Ultimately, these students will be in a high school and other settings, airports, New York City, trains, where police officers are present, and exposure now with guidance and support will help normalize this experience in a way that also supports their mental health. Another concern I heard in the task force about the potential for discipline to become an issue. To that, I want to reiterate that Sheriff McConville made it abundantly clear. SROs do not engage in discipline. Their role is to provide an added layer of security, guidance, and support, and to not enforce discipline within the school. That distinction is crucial in addressing the concerns that the presence of an officer might inadvertently lead to punitive actions. Do I want to live in a world where we need extra security measures like an SRO? No, of course not. But that's the reality we face today, is that we must provide our children with a safe environment and where they can thrive academically, and that includes mental health, emotional, and physical safety. At the task force, we discussed Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we all understand that in order for students to engage in higher level learning, which is obviously the goal of school, they must first feel secure, both psychologically and physically. Safety is foundational, and without it, academic and personal growth are impeded. I firmly believe that implementing an SRO is not just a security measure. It's an integral part of ensuring that all students and staff feel safe, supported, and ready to learn so that they can do their job, and also the students can absorb the material without feeling unsafe or not protected. I urge you to consider these perspectives as we move forward in creating a safer and more supportive environment for our kids. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name.
Silvio.
Silvio. Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you. I'm even running off the name. It's so sweet. I didn't even realize. It makes people comfortable.
Hello, everyone. I'm just gonna wing it because I sent my letter to many people, so they know what I wanted to say. I just want to say that we are a beautiful and a strong and supportive community. We hear each other when we talk. We are not all the same. We all have different experiences with our days, with our family histories, with our personal histories, and we have different needs because we are different individuals. But we are in a community that is having an open discussion about a very important topic. And what I am pleased to hear today is that our board is talking about many of the things that have been concerning me. How does the inclusion of this new staff member in our community support everything that we are all trying to achieve at GUPS. I love that we are listening to our teachers. Our teachers are in many levels, in many ways, family to our children. Our children love our teachers, our children respect our teachers. They learn as much from them as they do from us. So we do need to hear their voices. But our teachers are working toward a community goal for GUPS. I want to make sure that we are having the conversation that everyone in our community loves this school because it has a mission of inclusivity. It has a mission of emotional support. It has a mission of turning our children into strong human beings through learning more than just reading, writing, math, which is a bulk load of our teachers' workload. But we have asked them to also deal with the emotional needs of our children, and we have made that part of our mission statement. And as we start talking about a person in our building who has an outward appearance of possibly not being a part of contributing to those aspects, I love that we are talking as a community that this person needs to have an MOU that is in line with our goals of emotional well-being for all of our students. We have students who are at risk for many different reasons. We have emotional risks, we have maybe their family life isn't stable, maybe their economic life isn't stable, maybe they are just different from the rest of their classmates, and they have the stress of insecurity in their class because they are other without being intentionally doing anything intentional to the other. Adding an adult to their life that will not other them is so very important. And having another grown-up in this building supporting our teachers that will support them in every way is also very important. And I'm glad that we're having this discussion. And I'm glad that as we move forward, we are going to be talking about all these angles and that we're not going to just go full force with a new idea because we want to make everyone happy, we want to make everyone safe. Having everyone feel safe is not as simple as having one person with one role. That person needs to support all of the roles that we are trying to accomplish in our school. Sorry if that was a little too general. I wanted to keep it non-emotional and inclusive myself, but thank you so much for listening. Thank you for saying that we are going to continue this conversation and that everyone is being heard as we talk about it.
Thank you. Ted and Zari?
Thank you so much to the board and the community for being part of this discussion and taking the time to hear from members of the school community on this issue. I'm a parent to 2 children in the GUS school, and as a GUS family, we have a deep appreciation for the school and our community as a place where our children have been able to thrive because they feel safe and supported. And we thank all of you, the teachers, for the entire school community for being part of that every single day. I'm here tonight because I do want to speak out against the idea of having school research officer. I know there's been a lot of discussion about this and a lot of data presented. It is challenging as a parent who sees this school as such a safe and nurturing environment to think about adding something to that mix that might make some of our children feel less safe. And the majority of students may be perfectly fine with this, but students who are neurodivergent, students of different races may have different perceptions, experiences with someone in law enforcement, with someone who has a gun and a badge, being a part of their school community. And I just want to be really sure before we add that to the mix, and it may be part of the ongoing discussion, maybe some of the additional questions that are shared with the sheriff's office. How do we ensure that students who are most vulnerable, the students at the fringes, who are most likely to be impacted by something like this, that gets taken into consideration? Because in some of the data that I looked at, the ACLU of North Carolina, in an analysis of 5 years worth of data from school resource officers in their state, found that students who were Black were 2.4 times more likely to be referred for discipline. Students that have disabilities were 2.4 times more likely to be referred for discipline. So, that it's just something that's a big concern as a member of the community and a member of the school, that those students who are most vulnerable, who are most likely to feel less safe with this addition, that those impacts are considered.
Thank you. Carrie? I'm sorry.
Walter Meyer.
Walter Meyer, thank you.
Sorry, terrible penmanship.
That's okay.
It's okay. It's actually easier to pronounce than my maiden name, so I'm moving on up in the world. I spoke at the last meeting, and apologies for getting a little emotional about it. I do want to bring up I'm in support of adding any additional security to the school that we can do. A situation that happened actually just this week to my daughter, who is in kindergarten. The entire class was outside during recess. She was doing a little activity and went out a different door as her class came in and was locked out of the school with nobody outside and was very upset, crying, scared, didn't really know what to do. I hear that this actually happens frequently, and I've talked to family members that are actually in New Jersey that this has happened to their kid, and I love the independence of allowing the kids to move throughout the school and giving them the responsibility of doing, things like this. I think it's great. I'm not faulting that. I'm not faulting the teachers that were allowing her to do this. I think it's fine. I just think that and I don't know actually if there are security cameras in the back of the school. I've been meaning to ask that question. But I feel like if there were someone overseeing these types of situations, someone checking the school grounds, I know we're worried about mental health within the school, but I think we need to consider outgoing parts of this. There was someone homeless behind the school 2 summers ago, and what if my daughter was out there by herself with this person? If no one's checking the grounds and there's no checks and balances sort of happening with these types of situations, I think we're missing an opportunity to protect our students in that way. And so I wanted to bring that point up, and there was also a bear last year, which affected dismissal of the school, and the instruction was to come back and to knock on the door to be let back in, which is fine, except I'm a little upset about the fact that there was nobody out there with her, because it's a scary situation for someone who's 6 years old to be abandoned outside, even if it's only for a short amount of time. So I just think that's an important part of this. I would like there to be security cameras in the back. This isn't a huge expense to add this type of thing in, and maybe it's already here, so I apologize if it is. But someone that's watching this, that's checking the perimeter, that's checking in with the students, that's occasionally monitoring cameras, seems like a good use of money to me personally. So that's all.
Thank you.
Carrie, I want to respond to you
Okay.
about a particular incident, so I'm going to give you a call tomorrow.
Oh,
So we
okay.
can talk about it, so I can address some of your concerns.
Okay.
Because it's important.
Are there cameras in the back?
We have upgraded, as I shared before, we have upgraded security all over the perimeter and interior. That's all I can say. I'm not going to tell you where they're aimed, but we have good coverage.
Lauren Johnson, please, for the GTA.
Good evening, members of Board of Education, industry administrators, members of the school committee. My name is Lauren Johnson, I'm the co-president of the Garrison Teacher Association, and I'm here representing all of our members, the teachers, and the school-related professionals. There's been some rumors, and we discussed this at the task force, going around, the community was questioning membership, if the membership is only the GTA or only the leadership. We're strongly supporting the presence of a school resource officer or a school special patrol officer. The executive board of the Garrison Teachers Association works hard to represent its members and their interests. We work to organize around matters that the membership cares about, and we speak here on their behalf. You should know that the concerns about an SRO and SPO has been brought to us by various members individually and through organization meetings this year and in the past. Prior to bringing such an important topic to the Board of Education and the community, the Executive Board listened to our members' concerns, discussed these ideas at meetings within our organization, provided our members with the opportunity to honestly share their thoughts via online survey. We consulted with our Garrison School administrators before also reaching out to other association presidents in areas who have SROs and SPOs to learn more about their experiences. In our survey, our membership, we did pose 3 questions that we felt were important to know going forward. 95% of our members responded to this poll. It's like 37 or 39. So when asked if they were in favor of an armed SRO SPO, 91.9% responded yes. When asked if they would consider an unarmed security officer if the Board of Education does not want an armed officer, they said 67.6% responded yes. When asked if an unarmed security officer would make them feel safer, 67.6% said no. As you can see, the narrative of the community that this concern is only GTA officers or select GTA members or the ones that were on the task force is not accurate. We hope that sharing this data will help the community clearly understand where our members stand on this issue. With that being said, the work of the BOE task force thus far has further solidified our members and therefore the GTA's view that the SRO-SPO will improve our school safety, increase emergency response times and readiness, strengthen community partnerships and supports, and provide opportunities for students to receive additional preventive education on topics like drug prevention awareness. The Putnam County Sheriff's Department met with the task force and spoke candidly about how they are building community relationships with children and adults throughout the county, helping school safety teams stay on top of the ever-changing climate of our world, and helping connect schools to important resources for students who need them. Their representatives will further explain how the SRO-SPO would immediately be aware of any law enforcement issues happening in our area that potentially we need to know and react to. I encourage anyone who wants to know more about anything that we discussed to reach out to any of the task force members. Sadly, the idea that SRO and SPOs are only in high schools is a thing of the past. SRO and SPOs are present in all of the Putnam County schools at this time, or at least in Haldane on the one campus. All. Many other districts have dedicated themselves to providing extra layers of security, from their K-2 buildings all the way to their high schools. In 2022, we discussed Botanical Hills. The only other K district in our region hired an SRO through their local police department, in addition to already having unarmed security. Wappingers just sent out a letter to their parents saying that they are looking to add SROs to all of their buildings. We are not rushing into this. The Putnam County Sheriff's Department has been running their SRO program since 1996. We are lucky that we have a well-established program available to us, one that has been tried and trusted and throughout all of the other schools in our county. It is time that Garrison Community and the Board of Education consider adding a layer of security to help us maintain and grow our security portfolio. As our neighboring communities have, we pride ourselves as a school community of offering initiatives that are the first of their kind in this area, which is fabulous. But please don't let us be the exception in the area of security. So school security is not something that we can make exceptions for. Thank you.
Thank you. Allison?
Hello. I would like to start by thanking the members of the school board and the task force for the care and thoughtfulness that you are putting into this question. It's clearly not a simple quandary with a cut and dry answer. And so I just want to thank you for seeking so many opinions so earnestly and for considering the opinions of each one of the constituencies. I have 2 children in this school, and obviously I hate that this is a topic we have to discuss when it comes to the place that is my children's happy place on this earth. And while I would love to say that an SRO is not necessary, this is Garrison, we're unique, the size has been mentioned. The fact of the matter is that there are unique circumstances that present reasons why it's necessary here, just like it is at any school. And we've heard that from law enforcement, and it is on us to react and respond accordingly. I understand, and I really, really hear the argument that's been raised that a police officer on campus might scare the students. And so while thinking through this topic, I've sought the opinions of parents from neighboring schools where an SRO is a presence on the campus. And in each of the conversations that I had, I heard unanimously positive feedback from these parents, some of whom went into the idea skeptically on their own end. One Haldane mom whose background is in mental health shared that the SRO there is perceived by her children as a friend and an ally. And in fact, they made a secret handshake with this SRO because they love him so much and they feel so safe with him. Another parent who is a teacher, a special education teacher, and who has a neurodivergent student there at Haldane, shared that the SRO was in their school play because he is such an integrated part of the community. And she shared how she feels just that deeper sense of security every morning when she drops her kids off on the campus, that she knows that that person is there dedicated to looking out for her kids and looking out for the kids and the faculty in the building. I see the possible presence of an SRO on campus as a positive opportunity for community engagement for these kids, for exposure and for additional chances for education, for de-escalation, and of course the critical support and the possibility of the worst case scenario. We have heard a lot about the data that it can't prove that SROs save lives in the case of that worst case scenario, to which I say there's no way to quantify the data of how often that presence provides a deterrent before the crisis happens or escalates. And in addition, another huge point for me is the critical and much more rapid response time if you are in the nightmare situation that none of us want to consider, and having that access and communication. I've also heard some people say, why now? This seems hasty, or this seems to be moving too quickly, or it's rushed. But the reality is that there's nothing rushed about this. As we just heard, the teachers have been asking for this for years. I actually remember one of my older daughters in 3rd grade, I remember within the first few months of her starting in kindergarten, there being the anxiety in the community, people asking for this and wanting this for the school. And I understand it didn't get board approval or it didn't get, this far along the last time. And then we had obviously a pandemic, and we had construction, and we had budget crises. And it got lost in the broader discussion, but now we have the opportunity to address it and to hear the teachers and to hear the faculty in what they're saying. These are the teachers who came to school every day during the pandemic, prepared to take our children's germs, to the face, when we had very little idea of what those risks were that these teachers were facing. And I'm really, really moved by the 90+% vote that speaks to me very, very loudly. I trust these teachers, and I thank them because I know that they would be the ones who would give their lives for my children if we were in this crisis nightmare that none of us even want to think about. I heard at a town meeting a few years ago on another issue that if you stick around this town for long enough, your adversary on one fight is going to be your ally on the next one. And you can't let it get personal. And the fact of the matter is that this is also, it's not a political issue, but no, I think everything in this current climate feels like it has the potential to become more heightened or charged. But the fact of the matter is that we are all on the same team because everybody in this room wants the same thing, which is that we want the safety and the well-being of our students, our children, our faculty, and our staff. And so I believe that the unfortunate but right outcome in this scenario is to bring an SRO onto the team here at Tufts, to be a member of the team, and I urge the board to listen to the voices of the community in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. Next reading.
Hi all, Grady Oaks. I live in Garrison. Got a kid who's here. I appreciate all the effort and the thoughtfulness that went into the task force. I think my main takeaway on that is, again, we covered a lot of ground, but I feel like there were a lot of open questions in addition to just the 12. And you can have a plan, but there's like layers on how you execute a plan that I think requires significant more amount of time and thought. I wrote some stuff down, like I appreciate the commitment to keeping students safe. I understand why this is being considered. Everybody wants a kid to be safe in school, no stop. My concern is not whether security matters, it absolutely does, but how do we ensure safety in the smartest and the safest way? And we've been talking a lot about the worst possible outcome. And then we've also heard, hey, don't just think about the worst possible outcome. Also think about, the stranger walking around on the school, like the list of things that wherever this person was that had this SRO, like the interventions that they've made, like none of them I looked at and thought, oh, God forbid that happens. Honestly, like a bear or your kid getting locked out of school, that's like way more compelling than anything that I saw on that list. I will say though that if you talk about the worst case, and if you talk about the edge case, let's talk about the worst case and the edge cases in a different context. And that is that unfortunately, like if there is a school shooter, the data that is indisputable, we can debate this other stuff, but it's just like sadly indisputable, is it will be a current or a former student. That's what happens. That's horrible. That's horrifying. And then when you think about maybe not the worst case thing, but the edge case thing, right? That stranger that's walking around on the track, something like that. That's a kid getting bullied in a school. That's a kid needing support. That's someone getting cyberbullied, that's somebody having a problem. And we're not clean on that. I know a family that had to pull their kid from Garrison less than 2 years ago because their kid was being bullied and the school couldn't stay on top of it. And that doesn't mean that it wasn't for lack of trying. It doesn't mean that the SEL programs aren't great here and that those people care. And it also doesn't mean that they can solve all problems. Like these things happen, but that was something that was another family's reality. And so from my end, what we're talking about here, potentially young people in crisis, it is known that we have a youth mental health crisis going right now. Maybe that is because like we're all such jerks and argue about these things that we don't have what Allie's talking about. We're like, hey, your adversary on this side is going to be your friend on the next one, and it's one community, and like that's what it is. But stuff I see says that 40% of all high school children report feeling depressed, feeling despondent, having those issues. It's 60% of girls, 60%. And they're not showing up on the first day of their freshman year being like, oh my God, high school is so hard, now I'm so upset and so depressed. And so what I would really encourage is that the board in the school, in the district, don't pat yourself on the back that you're doing everything that you can do from an SEL or from a social services perspective. Because again, we know families, and you know families, you probably have to deal with families that have had to pull their kids out of the school, that have big problems, that it hasn't worked out. And so I would just strongly encourage if anything that we do here, if we're talking about making an investment in security for the school, if we're talking about that and talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is safety, that we can also think about social safety for other people. And that while it might be the edge case, that we can think about the marginalized people, the neurodivergent kids, that maybe need a little more thoughtfulness on that. And so, that's just the bottom line for me. I think that this is something like, when I heard it, I probably thought a little bit more like you, Pete, which is like, and you can do the math on it and you can say like, hey, sadly, there's been 600 school shootings in the last decade. It's a small enough sample that you can like actually get into the research. If you go to the FBI website or the Secret Service website, they'll tell you everything about these things. You can like really figure it out and or see what's going on. But you can't look at that and you do the math and like, okay, there's 98,000 K through 8 schools in the country, right? How many of them are rural? Where do these things happen? And it's like a 1 in every 10,000 school years that you would think that there could be a school shooting that could happen here. But we're saying, whoa, 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 and I think fairly that the teachers say, hey, 1 in 10,000 years, like we still need this level of support and security. But I can tell you, like, again, 1 in every year, there's a problem with a mental health issue with a kid at school. And so if we're gonna do this thing, and it's about security, because healthy kids don't shoot up schools. Healthy kids don't bully other kids, right? If we're gonna like say, hey, we're gonna cover this one pile, let's make sure that the board makes the investment.
Thank you. Public comment remains open. If anyone else wishes to speak, you can come and sign in. Just come on up, write your name down, and then you can go to the podium and introduce yourself. This is Teresa.
my name is Teresa Fry, I'm a parent. I'm also a researcher, a social science researcher, and I actually deal with the other side of this, the school to prison pipeline. So, my piece is not, it's more like how to think about the school districts, prevent those components and pieces. First off, one of the things we are doing, increase the use of positive behavior interventions and supports. If we add this component, whether it's SRO, SPO, having an annual report where the total of disciplinary actions and push support out, that pushes students out of classrooms based upon gender, race, and ability, because this is actually seen as the largest piece, is the discipline piece, which I know we've moved away from, as well as the conversation. Also, create agreements, which is what the conversation that we're having with the police department, but specifically about how arrests happen and the restraint that is used, whether that's mace, whether that's handcuffs, whether that's zip ties, what that process looks like. Provide a simple explanation of infractions and prescribe responses in the student code of conduct, which we don't have for this because we haven't done this yet, right? To issue fairness. The other thing is to create appropriate limits of the use of law enforcement in public schools. So what does that actually look like in practice? And then we already have this, but train teachers on the use of positive behavior for supports and at-risk students. I think we're doing that incredibly well. But I think this conversation of this discipline and then how this actually can affect later on, not necessarily by having an SR or SPO, but how discipline begins to actually change and can create massive changes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public comment is still open. And I'm gonna go ahead and close public comment, and then that moves us on, and I hope everyone stays for the 2025-2026 budget presentation. We're gonna shift gears a little bit. I'm really excited about this budget presentation, so please don't walk that away. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Greg, Dr. Scholl, and Jojo. Oh, promise me you'll at least read it online. Yes.
We will post the presentation too. Number one, I would be remiss if I didn't say the following. First of all, thank you everybody for coming and engaging, and really, I think the telltale sign of a really healthy community is discourse, engagement, and I just, again, am really impressed in this district, in our community, no matter which side of this issue you're on, about the engagement. So let's move on to everybody's favorite part of the night, so I'm leaving is our budget presentation for the 2025-2026 budget. Joe Jimmick and I will present. I will start it off. There's a couple budget objectives that we have in this budget that we're presenting this evening. Number one, we want to stay within the allowable tax levy, which we believe the budget we're presenting this evening does. We want to provide the Garrison community with a transparent budget process based upon input from the Finance Committee, which we have, and key stakeholders. So Joe and I met with all of our, whether it be our clinicians, whether it be our nurse, whether it be our physical education and athletic department, our building principal. We took all the data of what they need next year to be successful and move us forward and put that in this proposed budget. We also want to make sure that we repair and properly maintain the district's facilities and infrastructure. We are sitting in a wonderful space that the community provided for our students, but like our own homes, as things age, we have to make sure we do essential repairs so that we can maintain them. We also want to maintain a budget that has lines based on actual spending, but also aligned with the projections that we have for the 25-26 school year. We want to maintain staffing levels and support programs that promote the district's strategic goals, our initiatives, as well as our vision of a Garrison graduate. So we've talked about our vogue or our vision of a graduate many times, and we want to make sure that this guides every decision that we make, and they say that your values are what you see in the district's budget in terms of schools. We believe this budget gets us towards the skills dispositions of our vision of a graduate. This budget also has specific priorities. Our priorities are, in no such order, instructional programs and initiatives. We have staffing implications in this budget, infrastructure, capital projects, as well as transportation. So I want to talk a little bit about our instructional programs. So for the 25-26 school year, we want to look at our vision of a graduate and talk about foundational literacies that we still have some growing edges, and we want to move the ball forward. We want, in this budget, you will see that we have added some funds to provide subject matter experts in the areas of technology and engineering to work directly with our students, but also to provide professional learning for our staff. One of the things I've met with all of our high school students that are graduates of Garrison, and one of the things that they told me, we do an incredible job preparing them for success in the high school, and you'll see in our newsletter soon how successful our high school kids are. But one of the things that they said we could do a lot better is in the area of technology, computer science, engineering. So we take that to heart and looked at our curriculum, and we want to bring in some folks that can provide direct exposure for students to maybe things we don't provide, is also provide some PD for our staff. The other thing that's in this budget, in the last couple of years, through ARP grants, which was the Recovery Act grants, we ran a summer scholars program that had about 38 to 40 kids on average come. It was a wonderful program. It was my first exposure to the district. Our teachers, our staff, our students that worked the program, it was incredibly profound in terms of the hands-on project-based learning that they did, the socialization, the maintenance of academic skills. Those funds are no longer here. We think that this is great for our students, and we'd like to fund the summer scholars program next year in our operating budget. The other thing that we, and it was very clear to me in my interview process about a 182-acre forest that I've hiked pretty much every trail except the ones that were overgrown. But it is an amazing resource that we have, and we try to utilize it as much as we can. But one of the things that we've talked and grappled with was how can we use it more effectively? How can we get classrooms out there, spend more time out there? And one of the things that we're thinking about is possibly designing an immersive outdoor educational space. This is just a rendering of what it could look like, not what it will look like. But we want to advance our work in environmental education. In order to do that and have hands-on experience in being a premier environmental education district, we think we need to leverage that space as a teaching space. So we have some funds in here to start the design process, to start to engage in what would that look like, what is the best use of that facility for our students. The other thing, as I talked about earlier, we want to continue to expand and unpack where we are in our STEAM curriculum and provide additional hands-on experiences for our students in those areas. We also want to continue the great work that we've done in this district that we're all impressed with. Is we have an incredible environmental education program. This budget continues to support that work. We have incredible special area classes in our middle school program, our arts, our debate, the STEAM. We want to continue to increase that. Informational literacy, which is part of our special area offerings, our theater, our band, our chorus, and our e-music. This budget continues those excellent programs. We also want to continue band and chorus in our 3rd and 5th grades. And we've been having a lot of success this year in our out-of-classroom extracurricular experiences, such as funding field trips, such as more clubs that are happening this year in the middle school than has happened before. And again, we continuously need support in our SEL programs. It's so critical to everything that we do, and we want to continue to support those programs. We also want to continue professional development. This year we engaged very deeply in our literacy and our science and reading. We want to continue to provide rich professional learning experiences for our staff. in whatever emerging instructional practices the research is showing us. And we want to continue to provide our teachers. We have the best teachers in the world. We need to provide them with the best professional development. And the other thing that was unique to Garrison and and I think in my discussion with all of the high school students that have been Garrison graduates, we want to continue to provide our students and families with an option of 3 fantastic high schools that they can choose from. So those are the things that we want to continue in the program, and continue in the program for next year. Our staffing levels, just to give the board and the community an update, these are projections, they can change. Currently right now, we have 1 pre-K section. We project that at this point to be 1. We also have a lottery system if we do go above those projections. Currently, we have 2 kindergarten sections next year based upon our enrollment right now. We're projecting 1. This first grade is at 1 section now. Kindergarten will move up. We're projecting that to continue at 2 sections. Second grade, we currently have 2 sections. Next year, we project that to be 1 section with about 15 students. Our third grade program is currently at 1 section, but those second graders will move up and we project that to be 2 sections. Our fourth grade is 1 section. We believe it'll be 1 section next year. Fifth grade, the same. And our bridge program, we project to have 1 section of our bridge program. With respect to our middle school, though the enrollment numbers may fluctuate, the number of sections will stay the same. So all in all, we have about 13 sections, if you will, in the current school year from pre-K through 8th grade. We're projecting to remain flat and be at 13 sections again. There are some unknowns. Definitely, enrollment in kindergarten is an unknown. We think we have a good handle on it, speaking to all those preschools, but you never know, in the summer months when all those things happen. To give the community and the board an idea of our high school enrollment projections, this current year we are at 90 students currently out in one of the 3 high schools. Next year we project to be 100 based upon the size of the graduating class. And in 2026 or 2027, we're projected to go down by 3 or so. So relatively flat this year, next year a little bit of a jump of about 10 students, and then kind of relatively flat for the year after. One of the things I want to talk about which will be in staffing is currently, and I don't know if everybody is fully aware, but currently we get our band and our music through contracted services through Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. We want to make sure we create stability. We have a wonderful band and chorus program, a feeder program in the elementary school, and our incredible rock jazz ensemble and band program in the middle school. We want to make sure that, and our music program as well, we want to make sure that we provide some stability. So our proposal is to move the provision of those services from contracted services to Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, and have those services be GUF staff, have them be part of our GTA. This creates stability in our elementary and secondary programs and creates a long-term commitment to the wonderful program that we already have. One of the things, all other staffing levels will remain the same. The only caveat with the asterisk is this year due to an IEP mandate, this year due to someone who was hourly, we increased an aide, which the board approved mid-year this year. So it looks like from staffing from the 24-25 beginning of the year, it's an addition of 1 aide. But overall, there's only a 3.0 add. 2 of it is just a transfer from contractual services. This is the music that I spoke about, to adding those people to those positions to be on staff. And the other one is that addition of an hourly employee to now be on staff mid-year, which we included in the budget. So the actual head count is the same, but in terms of budgetary staffing is FTE or full-time equivalency, it's an addition of 3. But the head count is exactly the same. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe Jimmick, who's going to talk a little bit about the proposed budget rate.
Okay, now we're just getting into some of the, like, the highlights of the biggest changes year over year. We're going to show a lot of pictures and a lot of information towards the end of the presentation with regards to transfer to capital fund. One of the things that we are going to be doing for the foreseeable future is the cost of money is high now as far as the interest rates. So we are building transfers to capital fund in every budget because we have additional needs in the school other than that was covered by the capital project that you'll see a little bit later. So there's an increase year over year in the transfer to capital line of $398,000. As Dr. Stoll said, the Summer Scholars Program is no longer covered by a grant. Those grants sunsetted in October. So we want to run that program again, so we're going to build it into the budget. High school tuition is enrollment driven, and then both transportation and special education tuition, those are both enrollment driven. You can see the trend line for the transportation. One of the things that you do see is we do tend to budget for contingent transportation because we don't necessarily know all the special education replacements and things that we need, so we do have to budget for in case someone moves in, because they do sometimes. So some of the things that are in for the next year's budget also is next generation science curriculum is needed. There's going to be new textbooks, so we're including $41,000 in the budget for that. We do see a need for some legal expenses for some matters that are ongoing that we need to increase the budget for that. And then for health insurance, there's rate increases as well as the participation in the plan, so the number of people that are choosing to opt into the plan versus to get a buyout, things like that. There's also a energy performance contract in the budget as a budgetary line item. What that essentially is energy improvements that can be done to the building where the savings in energy costs offset the cost of financing in part. That's a new inclusion in the budget. And then there is a placeholder for a design program to look at improvements to the forests. So that's improvements in terms of potential looking at a bathroom, an open air sort of educational space, and then access as far as getting vehicles in and out of there. So those are kind of the overarching things that we're looking at for that. And then bringing in and including in the budget subject matter experts for environmental education and science and STEAM things. And then we do have, as many of the staff members know about in the building, the copiers that we have been off lease for a couple of years. We do have, they are on the end of their life, and we do battle with them frequently. So there's new lease purchase agreements for a fleet of new copy machines in the budget. So these are some continuing things that are included. So we do have a allotment in the budget, $25,000 for field trips, and then the Youth Climate Summit, there's $10,000 allocated for that. And then there is, this is continuing, there is $30,000 for professional development included in the budget for outside contractors. So these are things that are under consideration, and as we talked, the school resource officer or special patrol officer is under consideration, isn't currently in the budget yet. And also, Jen is not here today, but she runs the budget task force, and that is looking pretty hard at the school lunch program and what it would take to start that up at Gufts and have like a real school lunch program. That would be for the other 4 days that isn't pizza lunch. So that is something that we're looking at. There's nothing currently in the budget for it now, but I think there'll be reports out at some of the next board meetings about that task force and all that might entail. So, but that is something we're still looking at. This is just an example of the inflation that is used as the snapshot in time that is compared to the tax cap formula. And as you can see, since the pandemic, 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less, we're behind, obviously, with the way the formula works. And that is a ongoing struggle for all school districts in New York State. Look at the revenue. So now, as of this September, the school taxes in Garrison are the lowest in Lower Hudson, and that includes Dutchess, Putnam, Orange, Rockland, and Westchester. So the median taxpayer in this region pays almost double what a Garrison resident will pay in terms of a per thousand of full value. There's 88 school districts which have taxing jurisdictions in one of these 5 counties. Garrison is 88 out of 88 at $8.48 per thousand of full value. There's some of the other ones that Canico's is there. They're 86. Curious Joel is 87. And just so you know, Haverstraw is the highest at $26.57 per thousand. So the tax cap is last year's tax levy, the growth factor, and the any exclusions that we have. So it's 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. Well, it's 2% then. And there are no exclusions for retirement. We don't have any court orders or judgments. And then there's the exclusion for the capital tax levy. And the biggest changes for that is for the increase to the transfer to capital, and then the EPC on top of that is what's the change in those 2 numbers. So those are really, in terms of, for Garrison, those 3 circled parts is really the main components that change for us. And this is a look at the actual calculation. And you can see that because of the difference in the capital exclusion, the district would be allowed to have a tax increase or a levy increase of up to 5.78% and still be within the limit and have just a simple majority to pass. But currently the Finance Committee is recommending that we do not go to that, and the selected tax levy is $11,650,000, which is a 3.58% increase in the levy. So this is what that means. So if you look at Garrison and you look at a single family home in the lingo of New York State Office of Real Property, that is listed as 210 if you look at the property type on your bill. That's a single family home. The median value, median assessed value in Phillipstown is $300,250, and that is an equalization rate of 33%, which means that 300,000 is 33% of what the actual full value of the property would be, which that would roll up to 889,000. And then in Putt Valley, there's a very small amount of properties in Putt Valley, but there are some. The median is 532,000. That has an equalization rate of 106%. So that makes the full value actually less than the assessed value of 500,799. There's your tax for those 2 properties, so 7,544 for the one in Phillipstown, median, and then 4,248 for Putt Valley. If you use a 3.54%, that would do an annual increase of $306 on the Phillipstown property and $172 Putt Valley. And if you put it in terms of a mortgage, That's $25 a month in Phillipstown and $14.35 in Park Valley. Are we seeking an override? No. You won't need an override with 3.58%, and it just requires a simple majority vote. We could have up to 5 3/4, I think, with a simple majority. This is a estimate or the budget for the revenue. What you see there, one of the main changes year over year is use of debt service reserve. That's included, so we'll talk a little bit about that. The other thing that is different is the aid is different, and that is because when you remember when we were doing the budget process last year, at the time when the board needed to adopt the budget, the state hadn't adopted their budget yet, and it wasn't certain that the aid was going to revert to. They had looked at eliminating the whole harmless increases, so there was potentially a $200,000 aid cut that we were looking at. And because the board had to adopt the budget before that was actually finalized, the 24-25 basic formula number is a lower number. So the information that we've gotten from Albany so far is very promising as far as the budget. They are looking at a 2% increase in basic formula for Garrison, so that's all rolled into the numbers, and that's what you see for the revenue. So the difference that you see in terms of the use of undesignated fund balance is $902,000 was designated in the current budget, and $1.3 million would be designated in next year's budget. The Finance Committee, as we get a little bit further on in the year, may also recommend reallocating an additional amount out of the undesignated fund balance into the existing reserves in order to bolster them. Most likely, you'll see a recommendation for increasing the tax cert reserve, because that's been depleted a lot over the last couple of years. And then we'll look at some of the other ones to see what recommendations can be made to allocate more if necessary. So this is just a snapshot of where we were as far as designated appropriated fund balance for the prior year, for the future year's expenditure, and then where you ended up in terms of change in fund balance. And as kind of was alluded to, last year's performance financially was very good. We had a number of things that broke our way, so we had significant increase in general fund balance. We do have, based upon what we know so far this year, part of it is the aid increase that was included in the final governor's budget, and also we have some additional tuition rebates and things coming from one of our schools. So we project that we're not going to need $967,000 of the fund balance to put to this year, but we'll only need $400,000. So 460, and then we put 1.3 million towards next year's budget, and potentially this is still very early. Obviously, we wouldn't necessarily need all of that. And by the end of 25-26, in June of 2026, we would potentially have 4 million of total general fund balance. This is a overall look at the budget, and then also that was by the sign-up sheet. There's also a single-page copy of the budget if you want to take a look at it. But this is what we have as far as the change. The biggest change there in general support is the reduction in energy costs that are offset by the energy performance contract. That's what that reduction is. Instruction is a combination of special education, tuition, and some other items, including putting the teachers on staff for music. Transportation is additional runs primarily, and then employee benefits is primarily the health insurance increase. And then the interfund transfers is the transfers of capital. That's the big increase you see there. So now we'll talk a little bit and we'll show some nice pictures of the building condition. So SED, Offices Facilities Planning, gives us a projected lifetime of improvements to schools. So if you put a roof on a school or you fix a sidewalk, they allow you to borrow money based upon that estimated life, and then you put 15 years for school improvements. And you can finance it, but that adds to the cost. So there's $648,000 of capital improvements in terms of transfers to capital in the budget. We talked to our fiscal advisors and asked them, okay, if we borrow enough money to cover $648,000 of capital expense, what kind of interest rate would we see, and what would that cost over the life of 15 years? So they estimate that we would probably be around 5% interest on a 15-year note, and that would be $235,000 over the life of that 15-year note. So if we have the money available, which we do, we think the right solution is to budget for the transfer to capital and pay it directly rather than the financing. Garrison does not get the benefit of any significant building aid, and as a matter of fact, is over the 5-year rolling average for maximum cost allowance, so would not get any building aid on this project anyway. So we need to lower the cost however possible, and to avoid borrowing money is one of the ways you do that. So we have it, so we can avoid the interest expense. So one of the things that you have to do every so often is you do what's called an enhanced building condition survey. And the last time that was done was in 2022. And there's a lot of things that are considered priority one, which means that they are things that need to be done within the next 0 to 3 years. Okay, so there's a lot of immediate needs. But that's kind of overwhelming when you just look at them all and try to do it all at once. So what the facilities committee did is they took a look at that and looked at what would enhance the most safety, because that is important. And so we looked at that, and then also building envelope. So what's preventing water, wind, and rain and things from getting in the building? So those are the main items. So we have roofing. There's a number of roofing projects to do. There was an emergency one that was done this past summer. There's one that's in the pipeline to do the gym roof. That's still progressing along. And then there is additional parts of the original building that have shingles on them. And what we do when it's windy or we get big rain events is after they're over, we go out and we go up on the roof or we go out in the parking lot and we pick these up, right? So, you know, if you look up at the roof, if people are familiar with Dolly Parton, you know, the coat of many colors. Maybe that's dating me a little bit, but you know, there's 2 layers of roof up there, and that was allowed back when that was done. That was allowed, you could do that, but those layers are peeling off. Those will all need to be taken down to the base. There is a layer of asbestos-containing waterproofing material underneath the bottom. That has to be taken off and put on new waterproofing shingles. And then the other thing we need to do is, in the 1908 section, there's probably standard size gutter, for lack of a better term, there, that's copper. It needs to be larger because the pitch of that roof is so high. What happens is any rain that's more than just a little bit of a rain, that shoots right over the side and goes right out onto the parking lot or in the stairwell or wherever. So larger gutters, and they have to be copper because it's a historic part of the building and it needs to match the historic nature of it. So there's $123,000 to redo that roof. where all the little pieces of the quilt is left. You know. And this is an example of the condition, you know, so you have stuff coming off. And the reason why it's not actively leaking is because it's pitched so high, you know, so it's pitched a lot. So pitched roofs don't leak much. That's an advantage to them. But eventually we'll get through the whole quilt and, you know, it'll start leaking. So we need to fix that. So there's also a section in over the main office. That is a flat roof, but it's a foam roof. So it's a polyurethane foam spray roof. So we have to remove that to base, and there may be a specific underlayment under that. We got to take that off. And then we'll install a new EPDM and foam board insulation as needed by code. This is very similar to the emergency project that we did as far as the layup. So EPDM rubber layer on the top and foam under. So this is a look at the roof from the top of the roof that we just fixed down at the main office section. And the principal's office, we have to set up a little garbage bag and a can there in order to get the water when it rains. So that's going to fix that. Okay, so this is the safety part now. So if you take a look at any, one of the things that school districts do is they're just like any other business. They have to deal with injuries. And one of the things that the most common injury, doesn't matter what industry you're in, the most common industry in a workplace is slips, trips, and falls. Okay, so we want to improve the property and make less slips, trips, and falls happen. So that's what these projects are mostly focused on. All three entrances to the front of the building, the concrete staircases are like crumbling. And it's mostly because when they originally put in, they didn't really have good concrete mix, I think, is really the kind of what's the issue with them, and so they're sort of falling apart. So we're going to replace all of those concrete staircases, including the railings and the nosing, so that the anti-slip stuff. Replace the sidewalks and the curbs at the front entrance, and then repoint. There's some retaining walls that we need to repoint and do repairs on. And then there's another staircase that's in the back by kindergarten that we currently have blocked off because the nosing is missing. We need to fix that. All right, so this was a couple of years ago. We took and did our best to try to patch that front staircase off by pulling off the loose material and trying to go all the way in till it's good. And we put in some anchors with our own staff. We did this and put in some anchors and then put in some patching compound. But that's all blowing out, and as the salt attacks it, it falls out. And really, these just need to be redone. So this is just kind of to give you an idea for scale as to how big the issues are. And you know, you can see that that whole support underneath that front nosing is compromised because that stuff is coming off, it's falling off, and you can see the railings in some cases are not good and rusty. And if you're going to go through all the trouble of taking out the staircases, you might as well do the railings at the same time. And then there's a number of parts of the sidewalk where there's deterioration. A lot of this that's immediately to the right of the main staircase that you come in is because there is a leader from the gutter system that dumps right onto the concrete and doesn't go into a drain. So we're also going to cut that out and put a drain to a basin, so that way we don't have that issue. And then we have a number of slabs that have settled, and you can see that they're trip hazards, so we want to fix those. And then you can also see the settling of the slabs, the height difference between the curb and the slab, so we need to take those out. And the right way of fixing it is to pull it all out, redo it, and that's what is planned. Everybody's gonna wanna buy Skechers after watching this. And then there's the staircase in the back. So this is another area where we just need to replace the nosing. The stairs are actually, better in some respects than out front, much older. But the nosing needs to be. And then next to that staircase, the retaining wall that forms out that corner, there's a number of parts of that where the masonry is deteriorated to a point where the water is really getting in there, and as that freezes and thaws, that's eventually going to break those bricks off. So we need to be scraped out, repointed, some bricks reset. And then there's also some in the elementary courtyard. And behind the middle school, the retaining wall that's there, there's a couple things. That corner needs to be redone, and then the other thing we're looking to do is to put some pins in the top block so that the top block won't want to come off as kids climb on it and stuff. So that's something to do. So these are still some unknowns that we have. The deadline for private school transportation is until April 1st. Yeah, April 1st. So that's when we know whether or not we're going to transport any private school kids within the 15 miles. And then if there's any out-of-district special placements that we don't, special education placements we don't know about yet. All the CSEs aren't done yet. We have some incoming pre-K people that are going to be in kindergarten. Maybe they're going to go out of district. We'll see. So in order to balance the revenue, we need to allocate 1.3 million of undesignated fund balance to support the expenditures. The levy is below the tax levy limit, and you only need a simple majority. If the budget is defeated on May 20th, the board could hold a revote on the same budget or different budget, or they could prepare and adopt a contingent budget. Contingent budget would require a 0% tax increase. We'd have to increase the use of fund balance or make some cuts. Contingent budget usually affects program and administration, and the district would be required to meet under the cap, which means that the ratio between administrative and program needs to be under a certain percentage. So there's two basic propositions. One is the budget. Shall the budget be of 414,536,000 be appropriated? And then we have a second proposition, which is extending the tuition contract with Putnam Valley for another 5 years. We actually do this every 2 years to make sure that there's contract is set for every 4 years of all the students' tenure at their high school. So that's why we do every couple of years. This year, this one is up for us. So there is a number of presentations coming up. We've got March 19th, another one right here. And then if you want to come out on Saturday, the 22nd, you can also come here and see a presentation or have an informal discussion, which is nice because those, you can just ask us any question. It's not, you don't have to sign up to ask a question. You just show up and ask us whatever. We have plenty of time to go through it and to have dialogue. So that's good if you want to do that. And then we're doing a virtual version of that on Wednesday, April 2nd. And then on April 9th, the board will be making the final decision and adopting the budget. May 7th is the public hearing, which has to be a certain, I believe, 7 to 14 days before the actual vote. So that's the public hearing. And then May 20th is the budget vote and the board election. And that's it. And now, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
I just want to thank you and Dr. Stoll for the hard work you guys put into this. I'm really proud of the budget. I think that They invest in educational programming. We talked about my daughter's an alum of the Summer Scholars, and that was always a very important thing for her to maintain her academics through the whole summer. And I'm really like what we're thinking about the forest, how we can get involved with that. And then just these infrastructure improvements that I think we're doing in a really smart way without raising, trying to go out and raise money, pay a lot of interest. I think it's really well timed. But this all goes back to the fact that we have a fairly significant fund balance now, and that goes back to the hard work that you guys have put in over the past couple of years, obtaining grants, obtaining extra funding in different ways. And so thank you once again for that.
All right, we're gonna open it up for questions. Anyone has any questions on the budget as presented? This is only for board, I'm sorry. No, it's gotta wait for public comment, I'm sorry. So for board members, do you have any questions on the budget?
Just a quick one. No, go ahead.
What did you say was the percent of fund balance if we appropriate what we're suggesting?
Okay, so, are you talking about the amount of undesignated?
Yeah.
We would still be over the 4% both this year and the following, but we're reducing it.
We're currently, I believe, 22% coming off of the audit from last year, so we're significantly apart from where the state would like us.
Which is a better problem to have in the reverse.
Yes, and we're still being healthy by not going forward, seems fair.
Yes. In case we do have the emergency, exactly. So my question then, to help the administration move forward, this presents a 3.54, but it is under the cap and it's under the allowable. Is the board comfortable with that at this point, going out with a 3.54?
Well, that was the question I was going to ask. Is the reason for that spread in case we need to spend on SRO program? Is that the reason for it, or is it relatively arbitrary, keep it under 4?
That's a great question. I think, I don't want to speak for the whole committee, but my thoughts would be, we have a lot of fund balance right now. I wouldn't go above 3.54. I would dip further into the fund balance. So not increase the levy if we want to add school lunch or SRO, but to just dip further into the reserves we currently have, especially if we're looking to say like pilot these for a year, see how it goes. The lunch program might be, once you invest in it, you kind of have to keep it running now, is my understanding.
Yes.
We might end up on that. We're gonna hear a report on that later, or whoever's on that committee. So that would be my, because I think 3.54, while it is under the allowable, is, an increase, so. Consider it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a reasonable number, especially given the rate of inflation. But I don't think I'd want to go above that, especially the amount of fund balance that we have. We still have enough to do a pilot program for SRO. I don't know what the school lunch ideas are yet, but certainly we can consider that as well.
I think, so go for it. I think if some of those are one-time expenses,
I was gonna speak to that.
okay, no, sir, I think if some of those are one-time expenses especially, like, that would make me more.
It's good to see the STEAM stuff in there, the next generation. I was curious, we heard a big presentation on the science of reading, and I just don't remember, are we where we need to be with that, or do we need, I didn't see anything in particular in the budget that was called out.
Yeah.
Is there more that we need to do? Because it sounded like we were doing a lot.
Always more we
Right.
need to do in professional. So I would say we spent a lot of money specifically on the science of reading. Our teachers are trained up. But as you saw, we're continuing a healthy professional learning. It was $30,000 in professional learning. There may need to be refreshers, or we need to bring people back in. Still on our literacy program, but the bulk of the heavy lifting was done this year. And by the end of this year, we'll have, literacy block recommendations, class library recommendations of what we need to focus on in SOR, which is science of reading in our classrooms at different grade levels. So the heavy lifting got done this year, the heavy investment in professional development got done this year, but as you see, we're continuing a healthy budget of continuing our PD in these areas, because the minute you stop practicing it, learning it, the research has changed and you're not up. So the continuing part of that, Peter, is supporting the continued PD in the areas of math and science and reading and all of that.
also just wanted to add one more thing that I forgot to say, which is that if you looked at the high school enrollment next year, you've seen this peak coming. And I just want to, it's a testament to the administration, Sarah, and everybody else's leadership to get these contracts locked in place where they're predictable numbers for us. It really, that also has allowed us to be a lot more forward thinking about how we're spending those fund balance, how we're looking at different things.
I think it's important also to, for people who maybe haven't been part of the conversation before, that we are not allowed to enter into a multi-year contract unless we have approval from the public. So we're merely asking for approval to entertain these contracts so that we can keep our rates steady and that we don't see a jump in tuition, which is, we had a few years ago and that was a real problem for us.
And that was the main driver, and I
Yes,
think the
yeah.
challenges that we had was the unpredictable tuition.
So keeping those rates in a predictable pattern is really important if we want to stay steady, especially if we're sending 100 kids. We pay for each one.
I have two questions. Well, one is more just for us to think about, given the SRO, SPO discussion, we don't yet know about the food school lunch program. But one SRO would be about 42 to 45, so 45,000. Two SROs would be 90. SPO, two SPOs would be 90.
Okay.
If you want, and the SRO would be 150. I think that some people voice this idea, and I agree with it, that matching or at least increasing the amount of money that we put into the budget for SEL or mental health services or communications with the public, so we can actually educate about, say, safe storage laws or other types of things, or the same with promise type of programming. So if we were to say match the amount that we add for an officer, so to say, it would be 45 for an SPO for one, so a match would be 90,000 added to the budget as a minimum. And if you went with an SRO and matched it, it would be 300,000 at the maximum.
Mm-hmm.
We have that in fund balance. So it's possible to do the both ends if we end up going forward with it.
I personally would rather take a look at what we need rather than just dedicating an amount of money based on the fact that this SPO costs $40,000.
So let's do that before the next meeting.
I would typically, haven't had any.
I think let's say, they have been asked what they would like. Maybe if we reframe the question, right, to the staff of, if, not what would you like, but if presented with the Sandy Hook, like an actual example. And then my only other question with that would be, how would you fit that into a day? And how does that work in terms of timing and allocation? So, but I agree, it could come out of.
Well, I would say that if we hire an SPO or SRO, besides providing security, which is all I would want for them, but other people have voiced that maybe they could do other things like push into classrooms, then they should be trained in these things, right? I mean, and if you don't have enough hours in the day, then you get this newly hired person who's just roaming halls otherwise to do.
I'm just thinking train of like the kids' time, because it's any hour they're sitting listening to that, they're not listening to a math lesson or something. So that was my hours in the day. I wasn't actually thinking of staff hours.
Yeah.
But that was a fair point. But I think we need to make that, we need to maybe reframe that question to the staff then and come back with how that looks. And if there is something else they're thinking of. We do currently still invest in, I know we didn't get into specifics in the conversation, but the Yale ruler, we've spent an extensive amount on the training for Yale ruler, which applies to all students, and our DBT program. I know DBT doesn't touch everyone because of the nature of the program, but we have people trained in it. We can look at having, I don't think they need to expand their team. They're pretty solid in their teams, my understanding.
Dialectical behavioral therapy, so it's a therapeutic
I didn't want to
approach.
get
It
that
talks
one
about
wrong. I just
mindfulness,
think
cognitive reframing, and a bunch of others. What I can do for the board is ask not only our clinical staff, but our teaching staff, are there any other programs that you think would benefit? We have a lot of programs, not just ruler, they're layered. It was in the infographic I shared, so we do a lot of it. But as any good organization, what else can we do to expand? We can certainly ask the question. We can bring that information back to the board. And in terms of the program time is, I think, a very good point. I'm familiar with some of those programs. It has to be integrated in a way that doesn't take away from instructional time. So I think also what they asked for, it also has to be doable. So I will make sure to get that information back to you from the staff, if that's okay.
Great, thank you.
I just had one other one, which is a couple weeks ago, there was a presentation about classrooms and space. And so I know it's not, I'm sure some of it's in the budget, maybe not all of it, so I just want to make sure that our teachers and everyone feel that they have environmental mechanisms to make sure that their students are learning to the best of their ability.
I mean, especially with the STEAM thing, because, I mean, do we have the right desk equipment to do the STEAM stuff you're talking about?
I absolutely love the question, Peter and Jocelyn. Money is in there in terms of professional development. Before you go and you buy something, we have to learn how do we use it, how do we use it appropriately, what does the research say? We've done a little bit of work around that, around the edges, but part of the PD work and part of the money that we put for PD is for our teachers or a group of teachers to really explore just that, to find out what do we need. And that takes time if you're gonna do it well. You could put a bunch of desks in, you can put a bunch of stuff in. If you're not using it correctly, the kids aren't getting good high quality instruction. So there is money in there to explore that, to push that forward, next generation classrooms we're looking at. So there is money in the budget to support that work.
I mean, I love the picture of Joe sitting in, I remember, that's the one slide I remember from that presentation.
We'll put it on the next budget presentation. I'll just
Yes, even I get to know.
That's all right.
We'll have it in Skechers too.
Skechers, I know. Everybody's gonna get a pair of Skechers.
Yeah, I have to thank Mandy, she's my footwear model. That's important.
Skechers.
All right, before we move on, do I have any other questions or thoughts on the budget as presented this evening? We will have many other opportunities to look at this, but thank you, Grant and the Finance Committee, for your time on this. Thank you, Joe. I think everyone now can surprise. I'll keep us with okay, we've already done public comments, so that drops me down to accept the minutes. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District does hereby accept the minutes of the regular workshop meeting of February 12, 2025 as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Thank you. Do I have any questions or comments on the minutes as presented? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. That brings me to committee reports. Jocelyn for planning.
Thank you. Okay, so we met, I think last week.
Last Thursday.
Yeah, February 27th. Dr. Stoll was there, Ms. Emmy, Sarah was there, Jennifer was excused, and we also had Alice and Krista. Is she going by Mrs. Nicole or something?
Please be called.
So we got the first thing we got was kind of a presentation by Ms. Cola about what she's been teaching environmental ed, where she's going with it, kind of mapped out by grade levels. And I know she's working closely with Alice and Greg on kind of crosswalking it and setting the stage for environmental education plan, which will be really more full force next year when we kind of involve more of the community and more teachers and staff to create a committee to really work on building out the plan. So I thank her for preparing it. It was interesting. I mean, they're doing a lot. They're going to get the biodigestor in there soon, and planning a lot for the what's it called, youth climate. So it was great to hear that. We heard that the self-assessment for the VOG dispositions is going to be showcased for the first time during the March parent-teacher conferences. So everyone who's going to go to the hotel for that, what your kids say about what they're learning about the 3 dispositions that we're in. Vision of the graduate. We didn't really address science and reading because we got a great update at a board meeting, so we didn't go through that. And then we discussed a little bit, like you just brought up now, about next generation learning in classrooms and how you can adapt the classroom for the next generation, but you also have to, supplement that with the right kind of teaching methodology. And so this is something that we're kind of embarking on, and it's one of our goals, our board goals for the year. So we're keeping on it and making sure it doesn't drop. But that's the gist of what we discussed. Did I miss anything?
So I give you credit for staying on that board goal. And you're so closely tied to the DOG. I will say I was impressed that our new environmental education teacher hadn't been here very long and was able to put together a presentation, so I really appreciate that.
That's all I got.
Okay, any questions for Jocelyn on planning? Right, that moves to finance, Ken?
Yeah, we met last Friday and went through this presentation.
Yeah, you guys just saw it. I think that pretty much sums it up. Peter, policy, you're sitting in for Jen today.
Yeah, we didn't meet, but we have some policies later in the agenda for a second reading.
Okay. And budget advisory committee.
Yes, so we met to talk about school lunch, which has been our mandate. And the minutes are here, one step that we'd like to take is to engage a consultant to help just think through what could be possible. I know Greg and Joe maybe have tried to reach out to certain vendors for that, but haven't been successful so far, I think. But we're still trying to find out what kind of inputs we can get there. Still talking about the districts to see if we could possibly partner with them on lunch. There was a survey that was sent out in 2023, and we'd like to do another survey. I think that's one thing that I think we'd like board input on, or at least, yes. About how to move forward with that, because we'd like to find out, again, just where the people with students, what the parents want in terms of hot lunches versus cold lunches, all dietary needs, like all those kind of things. So we'd just like to rerun a survey, and there's some ideas that the group has about what to ask. So we can talk about that. What else? And probably the most promising is there are several, local businesses that are interested in doing lunch, maybe for us. And so I think eventually we'd like to get to a point where we can do request for proposal from them to see what is possible. That sort of summary.
Yeah, I think that's great, Peter. I'll just, if I may add a little bit of contours and color to that. I think we're making some good progress. Number one, we have potential options with local businesses. The devil's in the details with that, and there will have to be staffing too. And so that's something that the committee, let everybody know. And we also have certain requirements for free and reduced for our population, and that we have to support that. And then we also have dietary and allergy requirements that we also have to make sure that everybody has equity of access to this. So there's a lot of details in it, but at least we have some great leads. We also have some great leads, and I won't put that district on blast right now, but we actually have a lead with another district. I know previously last year, the board, and there was no interest with other districts. We actually have a district that is interested, that may be able to be more flexible in their offerings for us. Anytime you deal with a program that has federal school lunch program, there's a lot of red tape and a lot of macronutrients that have to be accounted for, as well as a lot of bureaucratic things that don't make kind of shared services possible. But this one district may have some more flexibility, because in one particular school, they do not have a federal school lunch program, which gives us a little more flexibility. So they are willing to engage, and Joe and I will engage with that district and hopefully get some good news back to the Board of Education and the committee.
So a follow-up question on, if we were to look for budgetary call-outs, we're thinking 2 part-time staff members to serve lunch would be needed to add to the budget, and then you're also potentially looking at one-time upgrades to the infrastructure of our kitchen in order to be offering lunch. These
Yeah,
are the
you probably
types of
need
budgetary line.
a point of sale system, and the servery would probably need to be upgraded. You might also need hot and cold boxes, depending on how you're getting the food from another location.
Basically,
It's really hard to say, because it just depends on how it's transported,
Yeah.
what kind of food it is.
A lot of those are one-time expenses, not reoccurring aside from the staffing.
Right, and the
So-
staffing is not just to serve, it's also if we do partner with someone to get
Okay.
here, so.
Good year.
Do we need to make a decision on the survey or anything like that?
Oh, do you need the board to,
We don't know what the mechanism is.
does everybody support the idea of doing another survey on school lunch to the community?
Well, I think if we just, well, it depends. Do we want to be the parents? Because we're asking them, how many days do you want lunch and what kind of things do you want? Or is it a budgetary question of who you support?
I was thinking.
It's more what you want, because,
Yeah,
I mean, from Nurse Melissa, she was saying that we did about 200 pizzas, or people buying pizza on Friday. But I guess one time we offered cold lunch option on another day, and that was down like to about half the people participating in that. So knowing what people want, and we'll, you know.
I think also knowing what, the price point rate, like what is too expensive in other public schools where they have to pay for hot lunch, it's like $3.50. That's part of what I find attractive of partnering with other schools, we'll be able to maintain that budgetary level possibly and make it really accessible and affordable versus a very expensive hot lunch.
My understanding was that the 23 survey maybe didn't get into detail about, it said, would you buy school lunch for your kids, but it didn't ask things like, how many kids do you have? How many lunches would you buy? So there might be some value in just redoing it to get more granular detail, right?
Yeah, and like, would you do it, but only if it had this, that, and the other thing? You know?
Yeah, I think that's key too.
So, yeah, we can design a survey that. That's very cheap.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're talking about a survey for parents, and I think we have support to send that out.
Okay.
I think that would be useful information. Thank you.
But I guess when do we, we really considering putting something in the budget for upgrades?
I think if we can push this along and really, like, if the options on the table are realistic, we can transport them here. This is just my personal view. And we can make it work within the restrictions placed on schools for food. I think we should push ahead on it. And it sounds like if we have a school partner, possibly a business partner, that we're really getting closer to a place where we can make it an affordable option for have school lunch. It's not gonna be, in school, with school lunch, it's not the fanciest, so I think we should manage expectations on that as well. And we do, I just wanna point out, I think it's important that we do already have a budget line item for 300 currently.
Yeah, we include a transfer to the school food program to cover those costs. That's part of the budget. And then we would potentially adjust that if it went to like 5 days a week, we would adjust that number to cover that as well.
Do you have, is this the final report from the Budget Advisory Committee, or do you know? I can reach out.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact schedule.
Okay, yeah, no matter.
But, how are we gonna find out the kitchen needs, like, who would even, because we don't have a line on a consultant yet.
Yeah, so what we've done so far is also reached out to, there's a number of school food management companies. There's 3 big players in that market around here. And we've reached out to all 3 of them to say, hey, we want to do this, could you talk to us? We haven't heard anything yet. It's hard to say. We did come up with an estimate that's a few years old now. That was part of the ARP. Yeah, we could just scale that up with some inflation and use that. That's another option.
Maybe it's brought in, we can be very specific about what we need to upgrade, essentially a point of sale system.
Yeah, so you would need a point of sale system to keep track of who you're selling to. That would allow them to have an account that they can pay into, so you're not like handling cash, stuff like that. If it was related to a actual pre-introduced eligible program, you definitely need that. You know, if we're working with a school that isn't currently doing that, most likely the meal cost will be higher, but it won't be, it won't have all the bureaucratic things that are kind of a barrier for us getting started or to them managing us. You know, it's more, do they meet the health, the Department of Health requirements for the county that they're in? And, you know, can they get what we need and do it with the staff that they want to put in.
So it's an estimate from like My School Bucks, which is like one of those big point of sale systems.
Yeah.
Something like that, and then go with the heating. I mean, I don't know, is the AR, is that, would you be comfortable with the numbers from the ARP grant? If you adjust them up?
Yeah, I think it's a good start anyway. Yeah.
So I feel like we're pretty close on an estimate, provided it's not, because we're, either of the options, these two options, we're not reinventing it, right? So that brings us a little bit closer. We don't have to totally tear out the stove in the kitchen and deal with asbestos abatement or anything, so it really will reduce.
Right, we don't envision people actually cooking
Yes,
here.
exactly.
It's keeping things hot, cold, ready.
Is there a way in the survey to make that clear too, that it's not like a cooking, we're not looking for volunteers, and that's a struggle? Like, this is, somebody brings you, the food is there, these are, we're hiring and paying people to serve it lunch. I think that's key.
And these would be non-benefit eligible
Yeah.
hourly employees. Is that right?
That's the goal.
The big question is, do people in this town want want a school type lunch? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you could spend a lot of money making a gourmet meal for each student, but it's probably gonna be too expensive, so where is that?
And also be mindful that we have to still cover the cost of the free. That would increase our budget line. The gourmet.
There are
That
ways
would
of,
be for sure.
there are ways of asking questions in the survey to get at people's idea of price too, but there's stuff we use to do that. Maybe we can apply that.
Yeah, that's going to be a critical component, especially if we do partner with this school that's not in the program, because the cost will just match whatever it is it costs them to make it. It's not like being reimbursed by him.
Any other questions? Thank you for standing in for Jen.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for the help, Greg.
So that brings us to CSE, CPSE recommendations. Be it resolved, Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District approve the Committee on Special Education, CSE, and the Committee on Free School Special Education, CPSE recommendations and student placements. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Next, we have policy readings. Be it resolved, Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, following a second reading and upon the recommendation of Jennifer Harrington Wilson, Policy Committee Chair, hereby approves the following policies as presented. Policy 310, Public Access to Records. Policy 5683, Evacuation, Lockdown, and Emergency Drills. Policy 7220, Graduation Requirements. Policy 7224, Virtual Instruction. Policy 7513, Meds and Personal Care Items. Policy 7531, Students with Life-Threatening Illnesses. Policy 8330, Objection to Instructional Materials and Controversial Issues. May I have a motion, please? Do I have any questions, further thoughts? This is a second reading, so before we move to approve, these look like what we want to see. Anything more for policy committee on these?
Do I need to try to explain this administrative thing?
I think it's not, no, we don't.
Okay.
9:43 night, so we're gonna keep going then.
I'm not sure.
All right, I'm gonna move to a vote then. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Great, thank you. Thank you, policy committee. Moving on to personnel consent agenda. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, hereby appoints Mark Skinner as a certified per diem substitute for the 2024-2025 school year effective February 14, 2025, as per the rates established in the July 2024 annual reorganizational meeting. May I have a motion? Thank you. Do you have any questions regarding this? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Moving on to new business, be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, hereby approves the new business items as presented. May I have a motion, please? Thank you. Joe is happy to speak in detail to our cooperative bids if anybody wants it, but I'm going to go out and say no. Okay. Any other questions on new business? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. All right. That brings me to the second public comment section of this evening. I'm not going to read my paragraph again, but the same rules apply. You're welcome to come up and sign it again.
Grady once again, three things. One, Ken, this is actually, like, you said something in a board meeting 2-3 years ago. I think we're, like, why can't you just project these things years out? And you kind of said, it's wild, it can't be done. You were a little incredulous when you started, but it's incredible, like, the swings you can get from a year to a year. And I know, again, that's like good decision making from you. I know they did a lot with the special ed program. Like, that's hard work and great to happen. Thanks for being good stewards of our knowledge. To that end, like, thinking about being good stewards of our dollar, I just want to again urge the board to expand mental health services alongside any investment in security in our building and our facilities. If we can find budget for an SRO, if we can find budget to repoint walls that might fail in a couple years, we should also find the budget to hire more school counselors, social emotional learning expansion, early intervention efforts, things that are proven to keep kids safe with a lot of issues, right? We're not worried that a wall's gonna fall and kill a kid or probably where he's gonna trip and have an issue. This is something that we know can also be an issue. And then the last point when we're talking about like, hey, sending out another survey or asking the staff what they think we might need to that area, I would suggest that the staff's point of view and the point of view of people inside the building has been very well represented. We're hearing that 92% of people, or 97%, whatever it is, say that it is a great idea to have an SRO. Where I think the most conflict on this is where you see 30% or whatever it was saying, hey, I do not support this, or I have misgivings about that, are the opinions of people outside of the school. Our students and our teachers are two constituencies in this problem. There are other constituencies in this problem, and candidly, these are the more marginalized people, right? People that represent minority opinions or minority groups that we should reach out to and say like, hey, what's the issue? What will make you feel better? I think you have an opportunity, Greg, to call other districts and like, you can just go and look at the budgets of other districts. Like Brewster has all kinds of awesome after school stuff that they do that reaches out into the community. It's horrifying when you see that there's 60% of the people who say, I'm gonna support this, and those just the people that are always like, I'm not voting, people without students saying no, like it was just I don't give a shit about the school, excuse me, and like, I'm just don't want to spend any money cohort, like maybe, is there something you can do after school to engage our people with those people? Can we send kids to the senior center? Would it make them feel better? I don't know, but like Brewster's doing this, right? And they talk about it against SNL. So there's stuff like that I think that we could look at. It's outside of the school. It's outside around a tight budget. Ken, I'm totally with you that it can't just be like, well, let's just throw something at the wall. I think it requires like more aggressive pulling with people than just the people that are already going to get the thing that they want.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the second public comment. That brings me to board member comment and other discussion. Jocelyn.
Just thanks for keeping the conversation open about the SRO, mental health, school lunch. I'm glad that many people have voiced their opinions. I'm glad that the discussion is not closed. And then also, thanks for the start of budget season and for putting together the budget. And just so far, the budget. Appreciate all the work going into all. This is the season of new beast where it's a lot of meetings and a lot of thinking and time. So to get ready for it. Thanks.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, just to echo what Jocelyn said, thank you to everybody who came out to share and voice their opinions on the issue of the night. I know it's a challenging one, and thank you to you guys for keeping the discussion open, because I think there are still open-ended questions. I think that, we really need to be talking to our counselors about not what they need now, but what they also project they're going to need over the next couple of years or even maybe through the decade. And I think there's, I'm still very open-minded about this issue, but I still would like to go back to something that I've been responding to people with in casual conversations, which is I would encourage us, but everybody in the community and the feedback to us to really think creatively about the future, because as I said, I think in another meeting, that we really need to have a holistic security plan that does include more investments in mental health and SEL, and that an SRO can be part of a plan. It is not the plan. If it is the plan, then I think we have bigger issues. So I really think that we should not be addressing this in do we or don't we terms. And just one other thing that came up earlier too, which I hear loud and clear, which is that yes, it is an emotional issue. Yes, this is something that the teachers have asked for, and I agree that we should be listening. At the same time, while it is an emotional issue, while there's, Pete's made really valid points, other people have here tonight too, which is that, the science isn't fully there, and that this is, the 100% the right way to go. And while I think it's easy to dismiss data points that run contrary to the teachers and other people's wishes, at the same time, that's what we do as a board, I think, anyway, at least what I signed up for, was to take the inputs, take in the quantitative as well as the qualitative, and make decisions. I don't think we would ask, for a change to the curriculum, for example, without data, without real information, with the quantitative as well as the qualitative and the emotional elements and the experiential elements before making a decision. So I don't want to dismiss the data. I don't want to dismiss people's feelings. I don't want to dismiss people's experiences. I think we need to take it all in and weigh it, and really be considerate in a complete and holistic and creative fashion as we forward. So with that, again, I just, I think also it took a lot of courage for some folks tonight to speak out against this as well. And I think we really do need to hear their points. We have a lot of kids with IEPs, we have kids with disabilities, we have kids with of color for whom the risk might be elevated. And I think we really do need to be very careful and cautious about how we proceed, and I'm confident that we will be. So I'm really glad that we're going to keep the discussion going. I'm glad we're going to keep it civil, and I really do want to make sure that we're taking all of these inputs and not dismissing any.
Yeah.
Completely agree with everything Eric said.
You just stop right there. That's great. Perfect.
I do, greatly appreciate the open and constructive dialogue that we have had. Obviously, the SRO SPO issue is something that that does generate very strong feelings. I completely agree. I think we should be looking for every opportunity to, not necessarily just allocating a certain, matching amount, but absolutely, we should be always looking for what we can do better, what we can do more on mental health issues. At the same time, I think we have to always acknowledge the investments that we make as a district every day and that have been paying dividends in this district. And we've never invested in an SRO or SPO. We've been investing in or security in the building. We've been investing in SEL and clinicians and all sorts of mental health services and training, DBT training, ruler training, professional development training in this building for a long time. I think that's paid dividends. It doesn't mean we should stop doing it. It doesn't mean we should stop looking for more and that we should invest in more of those things. I certainly would support that. I also just want to highlight what a great budget this is. We are investing in all sorts of educational programming. We're taking the first steps to look at how we can turn this wonderful school forest into more of an educational outdoor classroom space. We are investing in security for the building potentially. We're investing we're making our music instruction full-time staff rather than contract. We're doing so much good stuff, and I think it's just really exciting to be able to present this to the community. And thank you to Kent and Joe and Carl and everybody on the finance committee for getting us to this point. We're in a really strong financial position, which makes a lot of this possible. So thank you to our great students.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes, I totally agree on the budget. It's great to see the first steps of next generation learning. Maybe not the first steps, but the continued steps towards that. I think that's the board's #1 goal this year. So it's great to see some activity there. And with regard to that and the SRO, I mean, we talked a lot about professional development, which is sort of like the implementation of all these good ideas. And I think, and the measurement that goes around what's working and what's not working. And with the SPO, SRO discussion, there hasn't been much a discussion of that. How are we going to actually measure, is this worth it? Is it a success? What do they do, on a daily basis? I think one of our who spoke mentioned this, how are we going to be tracking and measuring what a successful SPO program is? And people actually did say a pilot program, which I never heard that before around this issue. So is this a pilot? Are we trying this? Or is this a permanent thing that's going to be at our school for the rest of my life? And how will we know whether to keep it going? I think those are going to be interesting questions to talk about, and I hope we can get some some answers on those questions before we actually have to say yes, we're doing this. So, what is a successful program? To me, it's not just high fives and the goodwill of the police department. It's something else. I hope.
Just thanks again to Joe and Carl for great budget work, and thanks to the community for good discussion. On a lighter note, but just wanted to shout out Merrick and Reese Williams, who are Haldane. They're going to the state indoor track finals this weekend in Staten Island, so that's a pretty big accomplishment representing Haldane. And appreciate the insertion of all the high school folks in the scenes there, but it's kind of not just because my daughter's in there, but truly, it's good to again shout out the work that our graduates from Gov do.
I know it's really late, but one thing unrelated to SRO, I had the privilege of going to the Putnam Valley Science Research Program poster night last night, where they're presenting their projects as a test run for the WESF, which is hosted by Regeneron's science fair. Like over 800 kids go to this. These projects were so impressive. Protein that I can't even explain it. The girl around me so much, it goes through the heart to like break up calcium. I had to make her slow down to really explain it to me. looking at mental health, a lot of kids were addressing those issues, how social media impacts mental health, but also really speaking to their scientific process while doing it. They knew their presentations like backwards and forwards. Anyway, I say this to, they're looking for judges, like pretend judges. You can be anyone. So the next time this comes up, I'll bring it to the board, and I think it would be a great way for us, some of us, to go over. I've already tried to talk Greg into it. To go see what some of the students are doing with this program. I think it's a highlight of that school. And it definitely, all you have to do is, you don't have to have any scientific background. The main note they apparently really need, according to the coach, is telling them to slow down because they know their stuff so well, they talk really fast. And if you don't know a lot about any of it, it can be very challenging to follow along, especially with their excitement. So.
And a science teacher would be a good judge.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Learn some ideas about how they run their.
Yeah, they had a bunch of science teachers there too. We should see if anybody wants to go next time. Because I thought it was really cool, but I'm gonna try at least some of the fun. Yeah, all right, that brings me to, I have no other comments on that for tonight. Executive session, be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Free School District hereby enters into executive session for the purpose of receiving legal counsel. Can I have a motion, please? And, all right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye, yay, all right, guys, 10 o'clock, we're gonna be here all night, let's go.